And then we'll have Donna do some readings from three small readings from the book. Um, I tried it, but then I cry a lot, and I also laugh a lot when I get to the Creoles. So so Donna's going to do the readings. Um, Let me tell you a bit about myself and my family. I am mixed race. So the story is about a mixed race person growing up in a primarily, of course, as we all know, East Indian and an African society, with, of course, Chinese and Portuguese and the Amerindians who were there. Um, I I'm part Native American, Native Aboriginal Indian from the Carib tribe. I am mixed with African and with European as well. So that's my mix. Um, the uh, the book covers the period. Actually, on this book, you could see that's me when I was 15 in my QC tie, my Queen's College tie. My sister on the right, Elizabeth, and my little sister, Marlon, on the left. So they were, of course, Elizabeth was 2 years younger than me, and Marlon 5 years younger. So if we could, yeah. So I don't need the screen anymore, but I'll be going on for a little bit. The book covers the period from 1947 to 1965. This is really the time, these 2 decades prior to independence is a time when violence really started, unrest really started, and it just sort of built up from there on, to the point where the diaspora took place in 64, 65, where most people left. So, in Enmore in 1948, there was the Enmore tragedy where they went on strike, and there were 4 East Indians who were shot. Um, and that was when Chetty had come back in 43, and he came back with his wife, Janet Jagan. Actually, in the month that I was born, he came back as a dentist and started to practice. So he was active politically for about 5 years. So he was really working hard with the Enmore estate folks to try and lift their lifestyle. Then that was followed by the transport workers strike the same year, and then Jagan introduced into the legislation that he needed a new constitution to be able to better serve the people in Guyana. So on this painting, you'll see I titled this painting. This is one of my oils, and I titled it Diaspora.
He's talking about
I'm talking about the paintings on the screen. I don't know if everybody could see that.
That's behind the picture of Red Man that's on the cover. He's talking about that
Can everybody see that? Yes? Okay, great. So that led to the escalation, over the next 15 years, from 48 to 63, 64, where there was murder and violence, and then it just got bad at the end, and then the diaspora. Now, just the writing of the book, this took us 4 years. At first, it started as a biography, as an autobiography. I wrote down the account of my life and so on and so on. And so
more like a memoir.
More like a memoir. And then Donna got involved. So the writing is a shared writing, because we had a lot of strategy discussions as to how we're gonna make this book into something of greater value and memory and significance for people who everybody who grew up in that period, and also the ones who didn't know. Me growing up, did you want to say?
Yeah. So I just want to, if I could just pop in here and just say that, so the book, essentially it started as a memoir, but what we did is Aubrey wrote most of sort of the personal accounts in this story. He also tended to, he wrote you know, the Creolese, the Guyanese Creolese dialogue in the story. And he also wrote essentially like the cricket, because I don't know anything about cricket. We do baseball in the USA. Um, what we decided to do, and then I did a lot of the political research for the story. So we kind of integrated a story. We have some real characters in the story, and we also have some composite characters in the story, and then we have some made up characters in the story, all of which are sort of referenced in the postscript of the book, so you can kind of see which is you know, who's who, kind of. So I think that it's probably a good time, because we're about maybe 10 minutes in, if Aubrey could just kind of run through the PowerPoint
slides.
to show the other slides about where the story is centered. And
Yeah.
a lot of you will recognize some of these pictures.
Right, and what Donna said, the interrelational characters were incorporated to show the diversity of life, you know, for the very poor Indian classes on the estates and the working. So if we could go to the next slide, this is where I'm explaining where the story was centered. It was centered around Georgetown, primarily focused on Georgetown. We lived in the southeastern part, near Le Repentir Cemetery. And so this is a panorama. We could see there's a lot of action at the Stabroek Market in the book. But the story itself, there are accounts going from Pomeroon to Skeldon, and from the seawall all the way down to Wismar, because all of the events really occurred in those areas. So if I go to the next slide, please. And of course, we can't have a book without Easter Sunday, right? On the seawall, flying our kites. The next slide. Yeah, and these, of course, everybody is familiar with, are Forbes Burnham and Chetty Jagan, the main political characters. So their entire interaction during the time is what's covered. And then to the next slide. Yeah, so this is in February of 1962, Black Friday. Many of you might remember Black Friday. This was Bata and Lao's Camp Street Bazaar, where my mom used to buy her cloths to make her dresses for herself and for my sisters. And then moving on to the next. Yeah, so just building up some more, the Son Chapman, I thought I had the Son Chapman first. Oh.
Yeah, so this happened first.
This was June. This was June. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And so this is the Son Chapman. A bomb was placed. It's theorized that, of course, it was the PPP. 43 people were killed, all Black. And so that prompted, it's felt then that the next slide, the one before, I'm sorry, I had that out of order. No, the one before. Yeah, so it felt that in June, 3 weeks later, a bomb was thrown into the Abram house, and this was a major tragedy. The father and seven of the children were killed, and the mother recently died. She jumped out of a window. And my sister Marlon was a good friend with little Elizabeth Abrams at the time, which might have been the one on the top right of that photograph. So this was really the culmination in '64 when a lot of people had to leave. So so if we could go to the next slide quickly. This is just a shot of, I was born in Kitty. I was about 2, so this would be about 45. My sister was just born, and that's my dad out on the bridge outside of our home in Kitty. And then the next please. So that's my mom when my dad called and said he'd like her to join him in 53 in England, or he wasn't going to finish his studies. So we were left for 2 years. And this is me and my two sisters. My mom used to make their clothes. And so that's essentially where, uh, how the story evolved. So I'd like to really pass it over to Donna at this point to
Yeah.
do some reading.
Is it okay if we read a couple of short little excerpts from the book? And then that's really all that we had planned for today. So Juanita, is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Somebody let me know if you can't hear me well. So this is a chapter from Redman called Secret Passages, and it's set at a time. There are two protagonists in the book. There's a boy named Max, who is based on Aubrey's character as a young child, and his father, who is Derek. So this chapter happens when Max is 4 years old, and Max's father, Derek, goes to he goes to one of the corner stores in Wortmanville, near where he lived. So on Christmas morning, Derek took his morning constitutional before the children woke up. He made the short jaunt to Eunice's to get the Georgetown Gazette. Derek entered, his hat in hand, and Eunice gave him a broad smile. "I got some good soft beef, Mr. McKnight. Would you like some?" She gestured toward a barrel filled with brine next to the door. "Or I got some nice pigtails for Ellen's cook-up if you want." Derek said, "Mrs. Goodsight, you work too hard." He shook her hand and winked. One duddy does make damn. That's a Creolism. Eunice said, one duddy does make damn, Eunice said in Guyanese patois, suggesting that hard work always pays off. "That's true," Derek smiled, removing 2 cigarettes from a glass jar on the counter. "Those things will be the death of you, sir." "Don't I know it," Derek agreed. "I'll pray for you, Mr. McKnight, that you lose that curse. The priest over at Sacred Heart, he worked miracles." "That's kind of you," Derek said. Eunice was wrapping up some dried salt fish and newspaper for another regular customer, Cecil Wells, the barrister. "Merry Christmas and Happy Boxing Day tomorrow," Derek said, shaking his friend's hand. "Will we see you at the football club for 12th night festivity? There's going to be quite a spread for the Epiphany," Wells said. "We'll have to see about that, man," Derek said. "I'm watching my waistline." Mr. Wells chuckled, then took his leave, tipping his hat at Eunice. "You'll need some saltfish too, Mr. McKnight. I got some nice pieces for you today," said Eunice. "None for me," Derek said, pointing towards the back of the store. Eunice nodded assent. In the storage room of the shop, on a scrap of paper on the door, Derek read, "Citizens, the Demerara bauxite workers have now been on strike for 64 days. Who will come to their aid? Certainly not the British or the USA, who want our red gold at fire sale prices. Yet they pay our workers a pittance. 20,000 of our workers have put their faith in the Manpower Citizens Association in hopes of a shorter workday from 12 hours to 9. We can no longer tolerate the MPCA's false claims that it represents workers' interests. If real unions are to be recognized here, we must stop offering an open hand to our oppressors." Derek lit up a cigarette. He knew something about bauxite. He knew it was a kind of ore from which aluminum was made that Britain and America used to make airplanes. He knew that when the Americans had needed high-grade ore to sweeten its own during World War II, they came to Guyana to get it. He knew that Demba, the Demerara Bauxite Company, and the Reynolds Metals Company paid no taxes on Crown lands in British Guyana. That was all he knew. But he also knew that his good friend from high school, Robert Medlow, an MPCA man, lived an upper-class lifestyle, never mentioning his kickbacks from the Sugar Planters Association. Everyone knew that he got them. Some of Derek's closest friends were members of the MPCA union. Still others of Derek's old childhood friends and acquaintances were making meager wages on the rice and sugar plantations, at the wharves, or at Demba. He knew that they had not been well represented by the MPCA. Derek picked up 2 packs of 3-cent chewing gum, some tamarind balls from Max and Anita, and a Gazette on his way out of the store. On the way home, he sang to himself, "Christmas comes but once a year, and every man must have his share. Our poor Willie in the jail drinking sour ginger beer." So that's the first reading. The second is called Women in the Family. And Max is now 10 years old. This is when Max's parents were in England, and Max was left with relatives. So Women in the Family, this is 1953. It was a tumultuous period with British troops all over Georgetown, stopping people who looked suspicious and asking invasive questions. People were beginning to be summarily arrested if they didn't answer the questions in the right way. Max was afraid of the soldiers who seemed to be everywhere, even though they sometimes offered him candy or a stick of gum. He missed his parents terribly and looked forward to when his sisters came to Granny Bessie's for a visit. Kate would arrive at any time of day, the 3 spinster aunts accompanying her. She would tumble out of Gavin's prefect and stomp up the stairs barefoot, with her hair and dress flying in all directions. Even when she behaved like a wild Baku, Kate would do no wrong in the eyes of her aunts. The aunts would whisper among themselves, failing to notice Kate's wild behavior. Anita was having a different experience with Granny Lillette. Since Granny Lillette had been one of the first female Guyana scholars, she had high academic expectations for Anita. So sometimes Anita was not allowed to come for a visit if she didn't get A's in school. When both girls did come, Aunt Vivi would always be at the window looking to buy them a shave ice. Although she was blind, she recognized vendors from the sound of their carts, their horses' hooves, or by the fertilizer man singing, "Here I am at your front door selling my sweet cow manure." Vivi snuck them Chinese cakes too, a round pastry tart with sweetened black-eyed peas baked in a light crust. "Ellen always spoils the children with too many cakes," Lillette would remark. Sometimes the siblings would sit on the living room floor playing jacks or cards while the grown-ups talked among themselves. Sometimes they would pick out tunes on Granny Bessie's piano and sing a song with Uncle Gavin. If Anita became too noisy, Granny Lillette would say, "Anita, a lady does not guffaw like that. You sound like orangutan." Max felt sorry that Anita had to live with strict Granny Lillette, while Granny Bessie always gave him fish sweeties, and while Kate ran circles around the spinster aunts. One day, Lillette shouted to some British soldiers on the street, shut up, all women are up here trying to hear themselves talk." A soldier shouted back, "Close the window if you don't want to hear us." Lillette "You know," Max innocently informed her, "Ravi's mother calls you a fire ass." "I'll wash your mouth out with soap," Lillette threatened. Vivi took Max gently by the arm and removed him to the kitchen. "Max, you must apologize to Granny Lillette. That wasn't at all nice." "What? I didn't say it. Ravi's mother did." "Well, that's a very mean thing to say." She also called her a virago. She also called her a virago. "Oh, Max, you must never call anyone a virago." "Why? What does that mean?" There was a pause. "It means she's a fire ass," Vivi explained.
Same thing.
So there's one last thing, but I don't know if we're out of time, so I'm going to defer to...
I mean, you could do another 5 minutes if you wanted.
2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're okay.
Okay, so this is called Fair Lands Afar. This is when the character Max is 21 and he has the following conversation as he leaves Guyana for work in Jamaica. Max leaned his Rudge bicycle up against the post in the bottom house as Ellen was mending some shirts. You need some new shirts. The one you are wearing is too small. Buy yourself some for Christmas, Ellen said. This feels like it fits, Max said, taking a seat on a wooden box that served as a chair. His mother looked down. He could see the back of her hands as she sewed. Those hands, Max thought, are no longer as smooth and soft as I remember. He recalled how on his 15th birthday, Derek took Ellen's hand, lifted her from her chair, and led her to the radiogram. She looked then like, what was the word? Like a swan, not a swan, like a sylph. Derek had put on a well-worn 45 record by Mantovani. He took her in his arms in the living room, and lost in their own world, they had waltzed. In Jamaica, they wear brighter colored clothing, Ellen said now. Uncle Gavin won't care what I wear. Bada has a sale on good shoes. You need to get a new pair. You seem to know a lot about accounting attire, Max laughed nervously in an attempt to lighten up the conversation. I'll sew some cash into the lining of your suit, she said. You know, Mr. Haskell tried to smuggle all of his gold and cash out in a refrigerator, but his schooner sank. When will you and Dad be getting out? Max asked. Ellen looked up. Her eyes were like two smooth, dark stones. This is your chance, not ours, she said. Our time will come.
Thank you.
So there's just one thing, and I'd like to just briefly mention. One day I'm writing, and I leave. We had a sort of like a manufacturing production line. I would write, Dad would write, and so she says to me, "Listen, I saw you made a mistake in your Creole, and I corrected it." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well."
So I was reading Roy Heath, and you know that little tag at the end that the
Nah.
Guyanese say, they go nah.
No.
He spelled it N-E. And we were spelling it N-U-H. I'm like, we've got to correct that.
I like nah. No, well, Roy Heath spells it N-E. No, well, I like nah, okay?
I think we're finished. So whatever it is you guys want to do next.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you guys so very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
do the clapping.
Thank you
I know
so
you won't
much.
be able to hear everyone, but yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to
That's
read.
okay. I mean, I'd hoped to have read the book by the time we'd got to this.
I am
Actually,
reading it.
I was aiming for October because that's what we were originally planning. Rod is in the middle of reading it. Have you finished it yet?
No.
Not quite, no.
I'm about at page 120 or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
So we should probably just give a little shameless plug that it is available on Amazon if anybody wants to go there. You have to actually type in Red Man, and you have to put in McWatt, or else like a whole bunch of other Red Man stuff will come up.
yeah.
But I
Yeah,
think
the other thing to note is that if you're based in the UK, you would need to buy it from Amazon.com, not Amazon.uk. Amazon UK doesn't, for some reason, won't allow you to make the purchase.
Oh,
Oh,
really? I
okay.
didn't know that.
Yeah, that was the problem I had initially when I was trying to get hold
Listed
of
as
it.
available in the UK.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's like $15 US, which I don't know what that is
Right.
in pounds, but just FYI. Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me for
So
Yeah.
what were you, did you enjoy that, Rod? That
Well,
was good,
yeah,
right?
I did, and I just want to mention that Max is my grandson's name, so
Oh.
that
Yeah.
sort of pulled me into the book. But
Yeah.
it's an area, it's a period of which I'm doing a little bit of research, the 40s,
Yeah.
50s. So that really took me back, because that was when you based your story, and
Very evocative.
extremely.
Yeah.
extremely.
Yeah, we'll unmute ourselves after this, but I just want to thank Juanita and Rod for so much.
Oh, thank you. We really enjoyed it. And just so that everyone's aware as well, we are recording this because we're new to this, I didn't actually realize that once I pressed the share, it was going to be difficult for me to work out where the record button was. So I missed the very, very beginning. But you'll still,
gee. Okay.
I know, like
Oh,
the
well.
first 5 minutes or so, but they'll get the readings and a bit more,
Okay.
a little bit more than
Right.
that.
We're gonna go mute now.
You're gonna be perfect. Thank you.
So we'll move on to Gina.
So yeah, let's move on to Gina. Rod's going to introduce Gina Agnew.
Gina Agnew. Gina is an aspiring journalist and creative writer who is currently finishing her master's dissertation at the University College London. Centering her researching on Guyana, she is analysing the socio-political layers which have influenced the cultural expression of Indian Caribbean identities. She plans to discuss how Indo-Guyanese identity fits into wider discourses of community, compared with localised and globalised perspectives. She'll also be discussing the implications of the English language in Guyana and how educational standards have echoed and prolonged British legacy through literary expression. So Gina, the floor is yours, my dear.
Yeah, Gina, let me just first of all welcome, but also I need to just share the screen because I know you've got a PowerPoint. So just
indicate.
Yeah, just so that everybody's aware, you're now going to be seeing Gina's PowerPoint presentation, and hopefully Gina will be maybe in the top right-hand corner of your screens. So let me just have a go at sharing my screen. It was this PowerPoint presentation, and if I go this way, there we go. There we go.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. This has come at a really excellent time for me, actually, because my submission date is next Monday. So it's nice to sort of be able to sort of pick out the key points rather than be lost in a sea of words all the time. I'm able to sort of draw my conclusions without needing to have all my sources right here, which is lovely.
Yeah, good.
So thank you for Rod and Juanita for having me, and thank you to Aubrey and Donna as well, because this fits perfectly chronologically, actually, as they were writing about the 40s and 50s, and now I'm coming into a slightly more contemporary, little yellow line on the screen. So I named my dissertation Kaise Bani, after being influenced by the Sundar Popo song. It was actually also, it's a quite a popular song, and it's been remixed in different ways. And the version I know is called Plori, and I chose that because it's been probably something that's connected me to Guyana since I was a little girl. Me and my cousins and my brother have had Plori in our life since I can remember, so it seemed relevant to name it after a food that means so much to us. And I also find that the combination of Plori and chutney is sort of representative of Guyanese identity as a whole. It's that sort of mixture of loads of different influences, like there's the mango chutney with the chili, but there's also split peas, and these have all been mixed and combined to create a delicious food and also like a new identity. So that's what I wanted to speak to you about today. Next slide, please.
Oops, don't know what that happened there. There you go.
So my research questions, I'm going to go through what I've been doing for this whole year. I didn't originally intend to go to Guyana for my research, but of course, fate had another plan. But luckily for the internet, I've been able to speak to some amazing people, and with Guyana Speaks and with the contacts I've made here, I've been able to make contacts in Guyana, which has been extremely helpful. The main questions I was looking at was, how is Indian identity preserved but also reconstructed in Caribbean settings? I think if you press next, some more writing will come up as well. Yeah, and again, one more time. Yeah. So how is India perceived by Indo-Guyanese? Because a lot of the people I asked, especially people around my age who have gone through a second diaspora, living maybe in Canada or London or the US, a lot of them seem to perceive India as a distant relative. So they don't identify specifically as Indian, but rather either just Guyanese or Indo-Guyanese, because depending on who they're speaking to, and their previous knowledge will determine how they identify, which is quite interesting. So I looked into primarily cultural influences, because in scholarship about Guyana, there tends to be, they tend to pin Indian identity with Hinduism or Islam. And I feel like there's a lot more to be said about Indian identity, especially cultural identity. Just because you're Guyanese doesn't mean you're religious. It doesn't mean you're Hindu if you're Indian Guyanese. There's a lot of like essentialization going on in scholarly literature. So I just wanted to explore the cultural sector. And finally, how has indentureship and the legacy of indentureship, how does that affect the way that Indian Guyanese people identify? Because of course we've undergone a similar history to African Guyanese, but not in any way the same. And there are so many distinguishing factors that people don't tend to consider reading through literature. So those were my main research questions relating to the relationship with India, but I was looking at the more cultural sphere rather than religious. Next slide, please. So just before we look into that, I wanted to introduce how I am, how I am, who I am, and why I'm doing this research. And it's because for me, identity has been such a complex issue throughout my entire life. I wouldn't say I've faced discrimination, but I've definitely been questioned as to why I'm not like, why are you not fully white? There's something off with you. And I've never felt intimidated by saying my mum's from Guyana, my dad's from Ireland. But it's because the lack of knowledge of people and how they just don't seem to be able to locate Guyana or understand the demographic makeup that's made me want to research further and be able to give them an answer, like a detailed answer as to my heritage. Not that I feel like I should be explaining myself to anyone, but not that I should be explaining myself, but it still helps to know that history. Most Indian Guyanese, just in answer to that question, originated from the north of India. They came from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, the northern region. So the languages that they carried across was much of like Bhojpuri, and there was also a population from the Madras region as well, and that's where a lot of the religious tradition was brought over that was made into the Kali Mai and stuff like that. But as I said, today we're going to be looking at the cultural aspects. I also wanted to touch on the idea of Guyanese exceptionalism, because the different narratives where Guyana finds itself to be in the Caribbean narrative, the in terms of the diaspora, the sort of British Caribbean, but also within the Caribbean, there's all these different narratives of origin and heritage and pluralistic societies as well. So Guyana being on the continent sets itself apart from the Caribbean narratives, or being like like majority Indian population sets itself apart from the rest of Caribbean nations as well. So there's a lot about Guyana which makes it unique in terms of population and history as well. Next slide, please. So these were my main sections, and if you click again, there's a little pop-up. What I found, my main finding, is that language seems to be the overarching link and what links Guyanese identity with history and population. So, for example, in music, if you listen to a lot of the lyrics of chutney music, for example, they combine English and Hindi, and it's always like a beautiful fusion. But through music and instruments and lyrics, like we're able to refer to our Indian history and also bring over tradition that our ancestors have experienced and preserved. With food as well, food like is the most sensory experience. It's something that you just would not want to leave behind. It's something that you carry with you. And I find that with the more sensory methods of identification, like through music and food, it's something that is strongest preserved. These are the things like that tend to last the longest, because people, like, you don't want to let go of things that make you happy and that remind you of your childhood and your home. So that makes sense as well. Also, it's learning language through music. So Hindi and Urdu are not taught in school. Like in the National Cultural Centre, they've been offering Bhojpuri lessons, but Hindu is not taught as like a national language. So learning it through your family and through music has that extra sentimental layer to it. And I feel like that's what helps preserve Indian culture and identity, is the link to family, the link to oral tradition, but also the sentimental link. So I think that's how it's like best preserved. And then through literature and education, which sort of refers back to what Aubrey and Donna were saying, is that there are many more examples these days of Creole representation, like Creole language being written, especially through like dialogue. But in terms of education, there is this sort of lingering colonial legacy. There's this British voice that tends to narrate a lot of stories. And although that offers like a wide readership, it sort of begs the question of how is Indian Caribbean identity being represented in the literature that we're studying and reading. So those are the sections I focused on. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I was saying about the narratives, I spoke briefly on transnational Indo-Caribbean narratives. So I was comparing Indian Caribbean identity in Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Suriname, first of all, because there's a large Indian population there, and it's more like in the South Caribbean. These Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname are often compared based on their population and similar histories of plantocracy. In terms of the Caribbean diaspora, I find that a lot of Indo-Caribbean discourse and conversation tends to take place in Canada, in Toronto, but that also tends to overlap with the tension in Toronto between Indo-Caribbean and South Asian communities. It's quite interesting because there's this idea that's pervaded all of my research of authenticity and what it means to be properly Indian, what it means to be properly Indo-Caribbean. And if anything about this year, if there's one thing we've learned about this year, is that ideas of purity and like nationalism and authenticity, they tend to just drive people apart. And I feel like it's more beneficial to everyone to embrace the different layers that comprise our identity, rather than setting apart what makes us fully Indian or fully Caribbean. When I say that Guyana is in the Caribbean, if I'm speaking about where I'm from in the UK, people get confused because they don't understand that there are Indians in the Caribbean. They don't understand that there are Chinese, Portuguese, Indian, African people in Guyana. So identifying with being Caribbean has different implications based on where you are. So tracing identity usually falls into these main narratives, especially when it's Indian, Caribbean identity. Next slide, please. And then if you click 2 more times, I've put all the effects and animations on. The main difficulties I've found in researching identity, aside from the obvious barrier of not being able to travel and relying on dodgy Wi-Fi, was that it really depends on how people identify themselves and how they are identified externally. For example, there's this whole idea of it re-embracing or reclaiming the word coolie, because there's been even books, I mean, my desk is littered with books that have all of these people, books where people have reclaimed the word coolie. And not only does it sort of acknowledges our painful past, but it sort of puts power on it as if it's our word now and like we've overcome this. But it can also be used as a slur, as I was speaking about in South Asian communities and Indo-Caribbean communities in Toronto. Coolie is often used as a slur. Like I've heard examples, one of my participants told me of an example of her being called a coolie by someone South Asian. So depending on who is using which particular languages, it can affect how people identify themselves, no matter where they are. There's also a lot of, in terms of when I was writing up my research, in terms of administrative inaccuracies, a lot of scholars have drawn from colonial documents, for example, or documents who have been written by Christian missionaries and things like that. So what's interesting is that not only are some of the numbers in terms of population inaccurate, but these colonial documents are being used to paint the narratives and the history of people whose voices were never considered in this. So for me, it's a need for more oral tradition and more oral history when we're considering these things, which is what I've sort of tried to do, but I think I need to further my research on primary sources because the colonial narrative just sort of takes over. And then in terms of tracing identities, I'm sure all of you are extremely familiar with this, but the amount of variation in people's names, Prasad can be spelled in 5 different ways. I found 5 different spellings of Prasad, Prashad, Prasad, and it's extremely difficult to trace individual identities because of how many times their name has changed, or if they're known by their call name, or if they're known by their book name. A prime example of this is my Nana. His name was made on a whim on 2 different occasions. His name had so many variations, and by the time he got to England, he was Paul Deodat, when originally he would have been Drona Paul, or his name changed on so many different occasions based on how he registered his passport and based on coming to England and them having to register his passport. So tracing individual identities has been quite a journey as well, but it just shows the importance of having that subjective experience on the record and being able to communicate these people's histories through their voice and through their language. I think if there's a tendency to sort of speak people's narratives in a way that will be widely accepted, it sort of dilutes it in a way. We need to be able to understand and share each other on different levels. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, I think I actually touched on that. So I think next slide as well again. So as I was looking into music, I looked primarily at chutney soca, not only because I'm hooked on this stuff, but because it's probably the prime example of Indian Caribbean cultural expression. So you have artists like, I spoke to Terry Gajraj, the legend, and he was telling me how he wanted to incorporate as many Indian instruments as he could. So he uses the dantal, the harmonium, lots of different drums like the tasa, the dholak, and these are all different ways of keeping Indian culture alive. You can really distinguish, for me personally, the sound of the harmonium reminds me of my nana. And so it's just really like, again, as I was saying, it's the sentimental or like the sensory nostalgia, as I put it, that allows people to keep their culture alive and have it mean something to them. Because it's similar with language. If it's like performed in the domestic sphere or in places where you're comfortable, where you're with your family, it's bound to mean more with you. Also with dance, on the right of the screen here, I have a newspaper clipping, and that's an image of Pita Pyari. And in the 30s or 40s, I believe, she was one of the pioneer dancers who took to the stage and was able to perform Indian dancing outside of a sort of religious context, like the Matikor. And she inspired people like Dolly Baksh, and that was how dancing really became like a performative experience, and like women were able to like dance and move their bodies without it being seen as like unacceptable. So it's like bringing cultures from India and being able to perform them in these spaces that has allowed it for its preservation and development. Also Bollywood being a huge import from India, I feel like that's had a sort of adverse effect, because although while dancing and singing has adapted to the environment, Bollywood has sort of imported this constructed idea of India, and everyone in India, I mean everyone in Guyana like knows that Bollywood is really popular, and like all the films that they've suggested to me that I watch have been incredible. But it's interesting to see how different music and food have adapted to becoming Indo-Caribbean, whereas Bollywood has kept the image of India, as glitzy as it might be. Next slide, please. So food has a similar sort of, I took a similar approach with food as I did with music in the terms of sensory experience and tradition. So there are a lot of new foods that were made in Guyana like that out of necessity, like perhaps the crops they were able to harvest or the spices they had access to, they developed in Guyana. So although it might be Indian tradition and techniques, food is one of the ways that people have adapted Indian culture and tradition into Guyanese society. And now, I mean, my fridge is full of it because my nan just did a drive-by drop-off, but like food is the way that I most relate to being Guyanese. And it's that sensory experience and the sentimentality that allows it to preserve it. Was it? I think next, if you press next, there's a speech bubble. Yes. So I spoke to, there's a really good podcast that's just started called the Cutlass podcast. And it's about indentured history and the wider narratives, like it includes Fiji as well and Mauritius. But someone I spoke to who works on the podcast says that when it comes to migration and cultural integration in terms of Indians coming to Guyana, food is always the last to change. It's perhaps the most difficult to adapt because it what makes us feel good and safe, and it reminds us of the flavors of our childhood. And so just passing down recipes or learning how to cook from your family is a way to keep Indian identity alive. Also, the use of Hindi in the domestic sphere, but particularly the kitchen. For example, this man Vinay from the podcast said that he doesn't even know the English word for baigan or tawa or these things like this. He knows them because he learnt them in Hindi, and he would refer to them in that way as well. So that's the same as me. I wouldn't know what to call a tawa because I know it as a tawa, and it was made by my nana. But yeah, food is definitely a like strong way of keeping your culture alive. And then finally, if you go on to the next slide. Oh yeah, also there's a page on Instagram called Matthew's Guyanese Cooking, and I think he lives in New York, but he's recreated tons of Guyanese dishes and uploads the recipes of how to make them. So if you want to check him out as well, that's quite a good page. Next, please. And then finally, just education and literature. I spoke to a student who had been to high school in Guyana, but she lives in America now. But just speaking to her about what she learned in literature and history and English, she said that there was like, they do study like poetry and literature, but it tends to be centered on American and English writing. Like she told me that she had studied Shakespeare, which although Shakespeare is an emblem to the English language, she found irrelevant because she didn't see how she could apply it. And I understand that because although Shakespeare is very influential for me, I never related to him that much because I feel like I don't relate to that. So I was asking people primarily about how, like, which books they find that they associate their voice to, and there were very few that they could come up with. So for example, I also spoke to Kevin Garbaran, who won the Commonwealth Writers' Short Story Prize last year. And he too found that like written Creole like tends to just have a comedic effect, which isn't his intention when he writes. Although Creole is used in dialogue and conversation, a lot of writers tend to go back to narrating the story in standard English so that it's widely understood or it has a wide readership and it doesn't alienate the reader. But that just begs the question of what people perceive as successful, if it's a wide readership or if it's the effect of making someone fully resonate with what you've written. Personally, I have read this book by Unya Kempadu called Buxton Spice. If you haven't read it, it's really, really good. But the way that she writes, she uses Creole in the conversation, but she also writes in an English that isn't necessarily standard English. It's very rhythmic, and she chooses to repeat parts like as if you would in general conversation. And she's used English in a way that is more accessible and understandable rather than just sort of standard English creative writing. And if you haven't read it, I really would recommend it because it just shows you that you don't have to separate the characters from the narrator to the extent where it's like so disassociated. You do notice the link between her voice and the characters' voices. So I think that's a great example of how we can, so to speak, exorcise the British legacy from like our narration. And then it also makes me think of the question of writers in the diaspora. For example, we have Cyril Daberdeen and David Daberdeen, and both of those have written on the experiences of being born in Guyana but then moving again. So that's what Coolie Odyssey is about by David Daberdeen. talks about this double journey of like the layers of identity and the struggle with that. So that related to me quite a lot. And then I think the final slide I have is next. So all of this sort of ties into the way I wanted to. The reason I wanted to study this and produce this work right now is I find it extremely relevant with the conversations that are going on, not only in Guyana, but worldwide. There seems to be sort of, people seem to be like closing up and becoming sort of less willing to listen to other voices. And right now, that's quite the opposite of what we need. So not only do I feel like British Empire and the history of the British should be taught in the UK, but in the Caribbean, where the British Empire has influenced so much about this region, I would have loved to grow up knowing exactly why like things were like this, because just explaining like, why are there Indians in Guyana? Why are there Africans in Guyana? Why are these countries made up in this way? So not only should I think British Empire should be taught worldwide so that we can fully grasp why the world is the way it is. There are certain platforms that have started recently, such as the Black Curriculum and No White Saviours, which are really useful for sort of providing an alternate voice to what we've been learning. But I think the incorporation of sort of unheard voices and different perspectives are extremely needed, because the way we've grown up, the way I've grown up, as far as we know, Britain has a monarchy and we won the 2 world wars, and that's it. That's all I know from British history that I haven't learned myself. So I think people need to start learning that in school. And we also need way more Caribbean writers on our curriculum, on the Caribbean curriculum, on the Guyanese curriculum, in the British curriculum, because these voices resonate with so many people all over the world. And if we're forced to just kind of stick with the classics, we're just going to stay in the state that we're in, which, I mean, we won't go there yet, but I think it's really important to have this conversation now, and like, especially with the restrictions they're putting on curriculums, which I haven't explored fully yet. Like, there's a much bigger conversation going on, and I feel like if we have the tools and we have like the literature and the different perspectives to discuss them openly in a safe environment in school, where you have loads of people from different backgrounds, then we might actually be able to make some progress. I feel like we're going in circles like headless chickens sometimes, because we're just listening to the same things and just paying lip service. But if everyone has all of the information, then maybe we can move forward. But yeah, just to sum up and thank everyone for listening to me, sort of my stream of consciousness right now. What I found is that language is like a hugely important tool of communication. Whichever language it will be, whether it's English, whether it's Hindi or Bhojpuri, whether it's Creole, however you are able to communicate with each other in a way where you don't feel restricted or hindered, or as if you're not going to be understood based on a fault of your own. Like, the way we preserve culture and the way we communicate with each other has no limit. It shouldn't just be in English, because then we're doomed to the same mindset as of sort of power in English and like the English empire. So what I'm trying to get at is that we need to use our skills and our language and our internal knowledge and validate our internal world by communicating however we see fit and however we can make progress. And I think that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Gina. That's fantastic. Have a look in the chat if you can, because everybody's been really enjoying everything that you've said. I think most people, I can see Sandra Agard, Corinna, everybody said it's a brilliant presentation. So I'm sure there's going to be loads of questions when we get to the Q&A section. Can I just ask everybody to make sure they've got their audio off? I've tried turning off everybody, so there's one or two people who's, for some reason, I can't work it from this end. So I just want to make sure that's all okay. And also somebody's requested for videos. I think if people are being quiet, I think it's okay to have the videos on. But yeah, Rashini says, thank you, Gina, insightful presentation. Somebody else says, you're welcome to attend the virtual sessions of a group that they founded called Caribbean Links. I don't know who the person is because they haven't put their name, just as AN. But it says we put on virtual sessions on all aspects of Caribbean culture. You can find us, I guess this is on Instagram at Caribbean_links_group and on Twitter via @linkscaribbean. And they've also got a session in October. So yeah, if everyone just has a look through the chat, AN has just explained that her name is Afia Nicholas. So there you go. And yeah, Rod.
Well, I just want to say that one of the reasons Juanita and I started Guyana Speaks 4 odd years ago were for people like Gina. Gina has just shown us her love, or from our initial meeting with her, her love for her Nana's heritage. She didn't know much about Guyana. Hopefully we opened her eyes a little more. But and this isn't to do with your subject, but as you were speaking, you were talking about call names, and
Yeah.
and when you say call names in Guyana, it's actually not so much based upon your surname, but a name that you have been given. And I just sat here writing down some names that some of my acquaintances were known as. We had a fella named Ugly, we had a Tall Boy, we had a Bruckan, we had a Fine Boy, a Shinehead, and a Chubby.
Bossai,
Oh, a Bossai as well. They're always a tribute. I think Auntie Joyce probably had a few as well. We'll ask her later. But
I heard that they take your most vulnerable spot and then they
they accentuate it. And also, why did you show Palauri? I'm so hungry right now. Oh my goodness.
I always crave it. It's a constant craving.
Anyway, with that, we move on. You want to get to our next speaker?
Yeah, so next speaker, of course, is Sandra Agard. Now, where is Sandra? Let me see if I can find. So, Sandra, can you, Gina, if you put yourself back onto mute. Sandra, ooh, I can see you. Hang on. There you are. Sandra, if you unmute yourself. Hang on, I'm going to unmute Sandra. There you go. Sandra, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So shall I do the introduction? I'll do quick introductions because we did a very long introduction. No, but we did everything very last minute, and we were just trying to get everything together quickly. But also, I think Sandra, you're going to be managing the video from your end. Is that right?
Well, I'm not going to. It's all right. Just read what you got to do. Then
okay. So I'm going to read what I got to say. So essentially, most of you, I think, will be familiar with Sandra. Sandra's been a really loyal supporter of Guyana Speaks, and she's always been at a lot of our events. But as you know, she's a professional storyteller, a writer, a cultural historian, and she's been a literary consultant for over 40 years in a variety of venues and settings around the country and also overseas. These include libraries, schools, colleges, universities, theatres, museums, art galleries, literary festivals, shopping malls, prisons and in the community. So you can see Sandra's had a really wide range of experience. She was born in Hackney to Guyanese, Hackney, good spot in London, to Guyanese
Not Hackney in
parents.
Guyana, no. There's a
No, not
in-
Hackney in Guyana, Hackney, London, yeah. And her storytelling and cultural and literary backgrounds a bit essentially steeped within the African and
you know, there.
who's, I can hear other voices.
Gilbert.
Gilbert, I'm gonna put you on mute. I've put you on mute. Anybody else I need to put on mute? No, just Gilbert. Okay, good. So just carrying on with Sandra to say that her literary background is essentially steeped in African and Afro-Caribbean oral traditions and is blended with the sort of Black British perspective. You'll hopefully have seen the biography, so I won't go into much else. And I'm going to hand over to you, Sandra, if you can. I know you're going to be talking about your parents.
That's right. Clap hands for mommy till mommy comes. Mommy bring cake and sugar plum and give Sandra some. Clap hands for Brenda till Brenda comes. Mom and dad will bring her sugar plum and give you all some. I begin by saying that song, or singing that song, or trying to sing that song. It's my mother taught me when I was small. As Juanita said, I was born in Hackney in the 50s, and I'm first generation. My parents came from Guyana in the early 50s, and they didn't talk much about home. What Gina said about food and the like was so reminiscent, because that's how we heard about home. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hopefully bridge Guyana and England together to show how Guyana influenced my life and how I was steeped in Guyana, myself, sisters. Now, it's very interesting, this, because when, as a child growing up, I always told everybody I came from Guyana. And I would paint wonderful pictures of Guyana, of all the rivers, because, you know, we sang the anthem, the many rivers, we sang it. So I'd seen the rivers. I never actually saw Guyana until 1992, but I had this image of Guyana in my head. And I remember one day, my teacher, Miss Evans, I was about 8. I remember I'm a storyteller. I was a storyteller from a very young age. She asked the class, who comes from abroad? Come in front and tell us about your home back wherever you've come from. Remember, I'm born in Hackney, London, England. I stepped forward and proudly gave a rendition of what Guyana was. And I remember it to this day for 2 things, because it was quite an interesting, colourful, and I did all, you know, like I'm doing now, the hands and what Guyana, what we ate, what we dressed in. It went on and on and on. And my friend Pauline at the time, my best friend Pauline at the time, still a great friend, she was in the class too. And she knew I didn't come from Guyana. Our parents, her mom's Guyanese, and, you know, her parents were Guyanese. And so, you know, in Guyana, everybody knew each other. And I remember her sitting there and telling me and whispering, I'm gonna tell your mother. And so I was really scared, because I was lying through my teeth. But the teacher obviously knew I was lying. She knew that I came from Hackney, you know, but she let me tell the story. And I tell that story for many reasons, because I had marvelous teachers at school. I was really lucky from primary school right through to secondary school. College and university a bit dodgy, but we won't go there for now. But wonderful teachers who nurtured in me a sense of self, a sense of where I came from. And then I had my parents who just instilled in me Guyana. As you can see, we've got the Guyanese flag at the back. And my mum and dad, even though mum, she'd been in England for 60 plus years before she went back home. Evelyn Agard. I will be presenting, I'm writing something about them at the moment, and so I will be presenting pictures and so forth. Not today, but he's going to have to imagine what they look like. But Evelyn Agard, she was an amazing woman. She came in the 50s. My dad came first, then mum, and she worked hard, as they all did. And what I'm going to do a bit of poetry, and maybe a bit of storytelling, because as a storyteller, I had two storytellers. My first storyteller was my mother. She would tell us stories of home. She would tell us stories. She would tell us how she went to school. And in her story, she told us how she had to cross rivers and jump on the backs of alligators. We were very, and as children, we really believed that my mother did all these things. And if you know my mother's a real scaredy cat. I don't know how we fell for that, but we did. And how she had a bike, and how she had a lamb that one day followed her to school. Now, does that sound familiar? But hey, we were gullible children. And so my mother she was an exceptional storyteller, although she would say she didn't know anything. It's a classic Black woman syndrome that for that age group. She didn't know anything. She couldn't read. She didn't know this and she didn't know that. But my mother was she was so clever. She raised three girls, worked nights, and then came home and fed us and clothed us. And that story. And as I said, I'm going to be writing this. But first of all, I want to share a poem with you. And this poem, I've been doing a lot about Windrush recently for the Foundation, Arthur Torridon's group, who, if you do not know the Windrush Foundation, please get on board. A marvelous organisation. For the last couple of months, I've been doing a series of talks. And so I was lucky enough to do a talk with Keith Waite on Wednesday, and it was just fabulous. But one of the things I've been developing is a poem, and it's a poem in celebration of Windrush and all those people, and it goes like this. It's called They Came. They came with grips, baskets, and boxes in hand, their British passport, their boarding card to the motherland, the mother country, England. This would in time prove useless, false and deadly for so many. Even some of their children, innocent of their future fates, would pay a terrible price for this passport that promised so much, yet delivered nothing but betrayal, denial, and chaos. They came in their Sunday best into bitter winds, foggy days, and moonless nights, from technicolor paradises to grey smoke-filled horizons. They came by ship, by plane, down slippery, tricky gangplanks, and across concrete tarmacs. Many came for 5 years max, clinging tightly to those grips, baskets and boxes crammed with back home. They had left their sun-kissed islands, rain-soaked forests, green mountain tops, and spectacular waterfalls. They left parents, brothers, sisters, friends, and so much more. Many would not see their loved ones again. For those 5 years turned into 60 plus. In the end, death, tears, pain, and so many broken promises were the only things left. But then, they did not know that then. They did not know that these promises, their dreams would fester and explode. So they came home. So they came with hope in their hearts, youth, courage, great expectations. They came as accountants, architects, bookkeepers, boxers, builders, carpenters, chefs, drivers, draftsmen, and women, homemakers, masons, mathematicians, like my dad, musicians, nurses, like my mother, RAF pilots, poets, shoemakers, songbirds, tailors, teachers, like my mum and dad. writers, the list was endless. But so many would never be given their first choice. They were asked to come and help repair this shattered, war-torn land. And they came, gave so much, too much. And now, as we, their children, their legacies now carry the grips, baskets and boxes of memories, stories of back home, black and white England, of days past, present and future. They came. And we are here despite all that came before. We live on and on and on and on and on. For we are their legacy, their children, and must give thanks and praise to those who came to what they saw as a home, who paved the way, who dared to dream, who dared to fly, to hope, to live with a mother who did not want them. We are the dream. And yes, we live on for those that came. Thank you. So that's one of my tributes to my parents. And we heard about Guyana daily. I mean, Guyana was in our hearts. My father was a PNC man. And although he got seriously disillusioned towards the end of his life, my parents have both passed now, about the way Guyana was going. He was very, very much a political man. We used to go, as young children, we used to go to all these rallies, and they were amazing. And yes, and what Gina was saying about the food was such an integral part of growing up in Guyana. My mum was an exceptional cook, and so is my dad. My dad baked black cake. He did a black cake at Christmas. Sunday, I remember Sundays. Oh, Sundays was so special in our house. I've got a poem which I'm developing at the moment. Called Sunday, and it's all about what Sunday was like, and it talks about the Guinness punch that he would make in the morning, and we would have this custard. And the thing is about this custard, I didn't eat it until very late because I thought it was like the custard at school. And those of you who grew up in England, who remember school dinners, the custard was so horrendous. I never ate it. And so like an idiot, I thought the custard was like that. You know, I never ever tasted it. And my sister, she would have it all for herself. Yeah, Brenda, oh, bless her. She would have it all for herself. Until one day I'd taste this custard. And I'd tell you, this custard was so nice. And so we always had to argue about custard, but that's another story. Yeah, my dad would, at Easter, that beautiful picture of the beach with the kites. Parents would often talk about Easter, and I'm involved at the moment with a kite flying organization, and we were going to do a wonderful kite making workshop, but this situation we're currently in has changed all that. But we were going to be doing kites and stories, and so we're hoping to do that, and I'm hoping to bring it to Guyana Speaks, but I'll talk to you all later about that, because there's so many wonderful stories about kites. My mother would often talk about kites and how she would go on, you know, she'd go kite flying with her brothers. And my mother, who's if you know, those of you knew Evelyn Agard, she's a very softly spoken, smiley person. Wouldn't, you know, just, you know, she told us stories about little lambs. I mean, that's the kind of person she was. She would tell us how they used to put razor blades in kites, and so they could cut up the kites as they fly in the air. My mother, and we were shocked when we heard that story, you know. But you know, obviously kites bring out the worst in people. I don't know. And so, you know, there was so much affection for them. I mean, but there were secrets, and that's the thing about the Caribbean and Caribbean Guyanese people. There's so many secrets, and looking back now, I know the secrets were, it was all a part of the you know, the what they encountered, the racism they encountered. And the great example of this is when in those days when you could get a Saturday job. I turned 16 and I was eager to get a Saturday job. I was eager. I went everywhere, did everything. And I remember one day I went, there was a hairdresser, a local hairdresser. Somebody's got their mic on. It's part correct. Yeah, it's got a mic on. I'll stop for a while.
Sorry about that, Sandra. I'm just
It's all right. Don't worry. I'm not. Listen. These aren't. These don't even apologize. She probably hasn't realized it's because she moved. If she's been quiet, be all right. I'll continue. Okay, no worries. Yeah, I went for this job. It was a hairdresser's. And being naive, it was a European, well, an English hairdresser. Let's cut to the chase. I walked up and down the road because I was thinking, get the courage to go in and ask about this job at hairdressers. You weren't thinking that you're black. You were just thinking you were a young girl, 16. You were thinking of getting a job. And friends had told me that it was there, so I went and they told me it had gone, and I knew it hadn't. I knew it hadn't. I mean, because I felt as soon as I walked in, I knew I'd made a mistake. Even that I realised I'd made a mistake, and I felt really gutted because I knew it wasn't. And hairdressers, you're just simply, you aren't going to cut hair or anything, even wash it. You're probably going to sweep floor. You're at 16. What are you going to do, really? But the whole racism kicked in, and I felt awful. I felt terrible, and I felt because I knew what was happening at that point. So I walk out the shop, and I'm going home, and my face, I was just really upset. My dad comes and I see my dad walking towards me. Now, if you know Guyanese men, you know that at certain times it's supposed to be a home. Even if you're 16, you're supposed to be home in your yard. What you're doing, miles away from home, what you're doing on the street. My dad had been on the bus coming home from work, and he'd seen me walking the street. He got off the bus and came back, ready to tell me off, of course. What am I doing there? But then I told him what had happened, and he just said, don't worry, let's go home. I remember him put his arm around me, and we went home. He said, don't worry about those people, there'll be other jobs. And what a job there was. I got a job at Islington Libraries, and the rest is history, because I worked at libraries for 40 years from that day on. I actually got 2 jobs. I got Marks and Spencer's and the library. I didn't want to take the library. I mean, who works in a library at age 16? And I was already known as a swot at school. It just was a cherry on the cake. It was awful. But my dad told me to take the library because I would have bankrupted Marks and Spencer's. Because at that time, the till, you had to count the money to give them back. And I ain't good with that. I would have said, oh, it's free. I would have. They would have listened. They would have been working out with all kinds of things if I looked at Marks and Spencer's at that time. But I took the library, and I'm telling you, it was the best thing ever, because now I've got a dream job. I'm working at the British Library, which I thought was retiring, but I'm at the British Library. But that's another. Oh, so excited to be there, even though with this whole lockdown thing. But my point is, back to that story. My dad, he recognised immediately, what I'd faced, because Dad faced that. I mean, and that's what I'm talking about, secrets that they had. And it was not that. Maybe secrets is the wrong word, because they kept things from us to shield us. When we were, myself and my sister were my father's stuff after he passed away, we found these immaculate bookkeeping books. My dad was a qualified bookkeeper. He always did. My dad was a mathematician. He did all my homework at school. He was just very good at numbers and maths. He was fantastic. He loved trigonometry, X and algebra. Oh, my dad, he got it. Oh, I did it with passion. So he did all my homework, and as a consequence, it was really bad, because you can't take your dad into the exam room, can you?
Oh.
Anyway, sorry. Anyway, so but we found all these beautiful, because my dad had fantastic handwriting, and so he was a bookkeeper. And I remember one story Mum did tell us about those times growing up in the 60s was one day coming home from an evening class. He had to run because he's being chased down the road by teddy boys, and he had to hide behind a wall. And that was, and that was one of the stories he told us. And they didn't talk much because it was too painful. I mean, my mum and dad, my dad went home constantly to Guyana. As I said, my mother never did. Her mother died in the 60s and died when she was about 40, 40, died very early. And so mum didn't really want to go back because she felt there was nothing to go back to, which was sad. But those of you know the Caribbean, the history that we have, you might understand that story. But as I said, growing up as I did, the house, the home we lived in was very important. The family was very important. And Gina touched on that a lot in her wonderful presentation. And this poem, I hope, is a testament to that time, that the growing up in the 60s and being the first generation of these people who came on the, by ship, by boat, by ship, by plane. And it's called A House. A house full of loud noises, rich smells, painful tears, and side-splitting laughter. A house in which 3 families were tightly squeezed together. We were right at the top. There were 2 rooms, a bedroom and a living room, with the kitchen on the landing, on which the heavy iron stove stood in all its splendid glory. A house of running feet on uncarpeted polished stairs. I slipped once and broke my shoulder to have been being worn. Sandra, you're gonna fall. Sandra, I fell and yes, broke my shoulder and had to attend school with my arm in a sling, where the teacher was having us sing nursery rhymes. Sing a song of 6pence, a pocket full of rice, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in my Miss, can I be the queen? No, Sandra, you're a blackbird. I want to be the queen. When the pie was open, the bird began to sing. Susan Phillips, the white girl, is always the queen. And wasn't that a dainty dish to set before the king? And then I know who were all the blackbirds. All the black kids were blackbirds. And I have to tell another story. I have a memory of wearing a grass skirt. I don't know where that comes from. Grass skirt, but that I've got to dig back in my memory for that. I've got to find out where that story, a grass skirt, and we were doing a play and I was in a grass skirt. Where does that come from? I remember flapping my good arm, for I was dressed for the part. I always hated that nurse. There were the tears of my mother. She was forced to leave me with yet another nanny. This was a story that was often told in the house. A house in which my father, in which my mother went from being there at night, weary-eyed, she would leave to go and do her night's duty. She would return the next day to tend to us. And we always had home dinners at that, in those first couple of years. And it wasn't no sandwich we had for home dinners. No, we had a fully meal. I always wondered when this woman slept. A house where my father was busy and nursing 3 young naughty girls. We have breakfast in bed, I used to boast to my friends. But this was the way they saw that at least if mum was late for work, we'd had breakfast before we had to go to school. Looking back now, you see how it was all well drilled. I tried to do all the latest dances. Ready, steady, go was my show. My sisters would be the reluctant audience. They would sit down and I would go, ready? Baby love, my baby love, I need you, oh, I need your love. And if they were a good audience, give me loads and loads of crisp and sweet, I would do a couple of encores. Stop in the name of love before you break my heart. Oh yes, we did a lot of shows. There were my uncle's records and the Saturday night parties when we children would run around the house, no longer at the mercy of our parents' codes of do's and don'ts. And we would do the following tunes. Now, how many of you remember My Boy Lollipop, do, 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 do. Twist again, like we did last summer. People who love people. That is actually Nat King Cole. Nobody ever gets that one. and having a party. And there was, of course, the classic that I hope some of you know, Stingray, Stingray, da 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 da. Well, maybe some of you might remember. My mysterious cousins arrived one night from British Guyana, BG, and all we did was stare at each other, weary of making the first moves. We heard of home daily and dived into with glee the boxes that would arrive from this faraway place, crammed with so much beautiful stuff. There was guava jelly, cherry and sugar cakes, peppers, gold earrings and rings, and maybe the odd bangle. And the clothes, oh, the clothes, they were always too small. For some reason, my parents, they never sent pictures of what we actually looked like to our grandmothers, who made these beautiful clothes that we could never wear. And of course, there was the telegram echoing death. A house in which during the night 5 people slept together, and my sisters would urge me to do the boat. The boat was our way of being safe. At the touch of these magic knobs and switches, I would transfer our bed into a boat and it would sail to Africa. Oh yes, Africa. For even at that young and tender age, we knew something much deeper about ourselves. If mum was not with us, her hospital would become a boat too and would sail away. But in the morning, we'd all be there, anchored, back, ready to start again. A house where I tried to play a big woman with the dreaded blue strap and was immediately turned into a tiny little squirt. Playing big woman was a painful thing on many occasions. A house where at Christmas, the Christmas tree would drown with presents, where we always argued for the same things. My mother and father never, ever put labels on their presents. So if my sister got better presents than I did, or vice versa, we would argue. I don't know, my parents anyway. And when mum joined us, did we care that she hadn't worked all night? Oh no, we didn't care. She had to join in with us, hoping to join in on our games. And we jumped on her, begging her to join in. And she did, even though she was tired. The house still stands to testament of my youth, my cousin's youth, and all my sisters. And those happy, memorable days. A little shabby, it cries out for a new coat of paint. Look, guess what? I still have Stingray. Stingray, Stingray. Do, 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 do. Those of you who don't remember Stingray, Stingray was a puppet show back in the day, before Thunderbirds. And you know, it was a business. And that was, listen, Stingray is important because this is a long poem and I didn't say, but Stingray was my first record. It cost 4 shillings at Ridley Road Market. So my parents, there's so many things about them. They gave me so much. They gave me purpose, because I know they took a huge risk to come to England. I mean, you know, my dad, they were in their early 20s. I do have, I wonder if I can show. I'm sorry, it's not on a, but I don't know if you can see that. Can everybody see that? That was my dad. That's his first passport. Essequibo. Wow. It just seeing that makes me shudder, and I just want to show you how they would look back in the day. That's him, probably that suit. Look how sharp it is. And that's how they're Sunday best. He was at a wedding that day. I do have a picture of them together. But this is my mother, Evelyn Agard. Sorry it's like this and not. Can everybody see that all right? And that's our front room, which is yet another story. Michael Macmillan, if those are not familiar with his front room, you should check that out. The Jeffrey Museum, or the Museum of Home, as it's now called, is going to have a permanent front room. And so it's my mother, Evelyn Agard. And just lastly, This is one of my classics. This is us as a family in that house that I was mentioning. That's, oh, let me see, yeah. Notice myself, my Brenda, my sister. This is Brenda. She is, we're dressed the same, and that's Linda. She's going to hate that I've shown this picture to the world, but hey, I'm a performer, and that's me. With my ribbons, which is another thing that Caribbean people love to dress. And my dad, very dapper, my mother, wonderful. Yeah, and so there's loads of stories, and I'm sure all of us have stories. And the thing we must do is start writing our stories. I'm doing that now. I'm doing it with my godmother. My godmother is another exceptional woman, Mrs. Agnew Hamilton. In her early 20s, she left Guyana to travel to Nigeria and Africa to teach. And there was a number of Guyanese women who did this. It's just amazing. And they were there when Nigeria got independence. They were there when the war happened, the Biafra War. And these women, this story hasn't been told, so I need to, I mean, she's now 87, so I really need to start with this story. Because when I tell this to people, they have no idea. And so there's so many stories I'm sure that we all have. I'm looking at some elders in the audience here. We need to write these stories down before they disappear, and it's crucial. So I'm going on and on. So you know, we can go on forever. Thank you. I mean, it's just where to begin, where to stop, because there's so much to tell, and I know there's not only Guyanese people here. There's other people. I know my friends Ken and Cheryl are here from Jamaica and Barbados, respectively. So do see, we as Caribbean people, we have so much to offer and to give to the world. And Gina was right. We need to get our stories down, and the whole Black curriculum. You know, that's that it needs to happen. Not many people are lucky like me to go to a school that encouraged Caribbean art. I had a teacher who took myself and another person to New Beacon Books when John LaRose had the bookshop in his front room, and and that was a teacher doing that. It was a teacher at school. And my dad taking us to see Tutankhamun, the exhibition at the British Museum. So, you know, not everybody is as lucky. And I know I'm really fortunate, myself and my sisters, and we need to start recording that history. Tell your histories, put them in a box. That's my mission, a story box. And so the box opens and each part tells a story. I'm done.
You're done. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you, everyone.
You're really well. I mean, I'm sure for everybody, taking everybody back down memory lane, but just talking about your experience of being at school and some of the racism as well that you had experienced. I'm just remembering that my parents were based in Nigeria on a contract, and I had been sent to school in England. And the first thing when they saw me as the only person, or one of the only people of color at the school, was that I should, I'd be good at sports, but particularly good at javelin. And they presented me with this javelin and said, it's just like an assegai spear. You'll be fine.
No.
Honestly, I went on to, I was actually rubbish at javelin, as it turned out. But I was
I'm glad. Good. It's ridiculous. You see, this is the assumption.
Honestly,
how can they ask questions?
Crazy. So, thank you. First of all, before we move on to the question set, I didn't mention at the very beginning that the reason we're able to do this Guyana Speaks today is thanks to John David. We don't have Zoom facilities ourselves, so we'd actually had to borrow it from John David, who I guess, well, John David of Guzda. I'm sure everybody based in the UK will know John David. So just first of all, thank you so much, John David. If we could all just do a virtual clap to show our appreciation. And also a clap for everyone. You can all unmute actually if you want to at this stage, just to give a round of applause and then mute again. Yeah, so unmute for a clap. all our speakers. Thanks so much. Thank you. So I'm wondering how we're going to do this Q&A. I think one of the things with the chat, I just wanted to mention, Sandra, before we go on, that a few people have mentioned, well, quite a lot of people actually, looking at this now, have said they loved your poetry and they want to know, how do they get hold of it? I saw a note somewhere up here, somebody was asking, where to find your publications. Also, what I remember, Aubrey gave us a link. If everybody has a look on the chat, there's also a link to his book, Red Man. So you can see that in there. I see a few messages from Jackie.
Anybody home?
I didn't hear who that was then, but yeah. So John David is suggesting that people can unmute when they want to ask their questions. So I guess if we can all, for the time being, have go back onto mute, and then if somebody could just indicate on the actual group chat, indicate that they have a question, then I can go to them and you can unmute. So if anybody has a question either for Aubrey or Sandra, or especially, I think Gina gave a very provocative, very fascinating conversation about ideas of identity. And if anybody wants to talk about that or have any questions, then please, let's go for it. Any questions? Maybe I'm going to ask Auntie Joyce to chime in. Auntie Joyce, especially we were talking about call names, made me think about Auntie Joyce. So I'm going to unmute you, Auntie Joyce. Let me see if I can unmute you. Gina, well done. Oh, I can't unmute you. Hang on. Unmute audio. Does that work? Oh, there you are.
Auntie Joyce, say something.
No, we can't hear.
No, we can't.
No, we can't
Hold
hear.
on.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
When Gina was talking about the names, whether you're, many years ago, I'm walking along the pavement by outside Booker's Universe on the pavement, and two Indo-Guyanese, let's say Indo-Guyanese, and she said, "You is the coolie, me is the East Indian." So she was saying that she was superior because that she being East Indian was the superior one, because the other one, they were both Indians, but she said, "You is the coolie, me is the East Indian." So you get this difference where even within the population, you still had like the hierarchy, so to speak. I was also interested in the food, because I remember when our East Indian friend was talking about what he would miss most, and when I expected him to say he would miss the dal puri or the roti, he said he missed pepper pot.
Ah, Amerindian.
Amerindian, everybody, and yeah, that's what he missed. Because Christmas time, everybody had pepper pot, and that's what he said in England. That is what he missed.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the identity? Where's the food? And how? And what was happening is that even though we were of different races, we adopted one another's food.
Absolutely.
So we had Chinese food one day, we had Indian food one day, we had pepper pot at Christmas, but we had metaji, and we also roti and curry. And you see, this chutney, it wasn't chutney, it was dal puri and the sour.
Ah.
It was the sour. Chutney is very English, yes. You had the sour to go, you had the roti and curry. But when the dal puri, it was the dal puri and the sour, or the palauri and the sour. My friend, when her name, when Joan sent me when Joan sent me the palauri from North London, she sends it with the sour.
What? Sorry.
Joyce, I want to draw your attention to a comment in the chat. Somebody called Janet Lawrence said to me, Juanita, is this Joyce Trotman? If this is she taught me at school in Fulham.
My goodness. Hello.
Well, I'm going to ask Janet to tell us a little bit about you later on.
Never
But-
mind.
Oh my goodness. Hello, Joyce. Hello, Joyce. You see, I have also got a good memory. This
But
is
yes.
going back years in Fulham at Gilead.
Sure, it's Fulham.
Yes.
I must have done. Oh, you know what? I must have done. It would be Fulham because
It
I
must
would
be
do the
you
course.
because I know your name, because it just says Joyce on there. It does not say Joyce Trotman.
Yeah, it said Nicola. I've got a new name, but it's not Nicola. My name is Joyce Trotman. Somebody's christened me a new name.
Oh my goodness. Hello, Joyce.
Nice to hear from you.
Thank you.
Very
I will try and get your
contact details.
contact details,
Yeah.
because I would really like to film you. I'm a filmmaker.
Okay. Listen, Janet, I'm gonna ask Corinia to talk, but I'll put you two in touch so that you can follow up the conversation.
Thank you.
But Corinia, if I can go to you, I think you had a question to pose to Sandra.
Oh yes, I did. Well, I wrote it in the chat, but I will say it as well. So yeah, I was just wondering what kind of encouraged you to write about your parents now? I imagine maybe you've written about them before, but was there any particular reason? And I had a question for Gina too, which is about what's next.
Do I go first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. I've always been interested in oral history, and when I did my masters, I did it on Black women's voices, and I wanted to do oral history of Black women in in the 50s, 60s, and I was looking at the nurses, and so I was always been interested in that, and I remember telling their story about how they came over to England, and I tried. I wanted to interview my mum, but my mum said no, she doesn't. The classic, she doesn't know anything, and so, but I've always been interested. I've always been interested in telling a story and recording a story. And now, sadly, my parents have passed, and I didn't get all the stories. So I'm trying now to, like a jigsaw. I mean, that's what my piece is called. The overall piece I'm writing is called Jigsaw, where I'm trying to piece all the pieces together as best as I can. And I hope. I mean, I had hoped to go to Guyana before, but now with everything's going on, it's got a bit tricky, because I need to go back to Guyana and start tracing those footsteps and piecing the jigsaws together. So it's I think it's important that we do that, because there's so many things missing, especially in our Caribbean histories, and that's why their eyes pass us, really, because they think we've not done anything, we've not accomplished anything. I remember writing a poem. So very quickly, I remember writing a poem at school. It was about we who have created nothing. It was black. We as Black people create nothing. I got an A+. I was happy. Oh my goodness, who's not happy with an A+? Got home, showed it to Dad. Dad said, "No, Sandra, this is not." He said, "Yeah, you think it's a good poem, but," and he told me another story why it wasn't such a great poem after all, because we are a people who have created something, and that's why we need to put their stories on the map. And it's not only about the kings and queens; it's about our parents. Our parents' stories are so important. That's why I urge people to write their parents' stories. And yeah, so I hope that answers it. Thank you.
It does, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm doing something quite similar, I hope. I did originally want to go on to do a PhD straight after this, but now I'm extremely reconsidering that. I need a bit of a breather, so we'll put that aside for now. But like Sandra, I'm hoping to sort of record my family history and trace it back and provide the voices that have not been shared nearly enough. And I also want to work. I recently worked on a zine about second generation second generation immigrant experiences and providing those voices. So I'm hoping to work on a lot of projects like that. I'm helping with one for Sister Space at the minute, which is a charity in Hackney for women of domestic abuse, victims of domestic abuse, and we're like hoping to continue. I want to do more than one zine to like, which is like an online to provide these voices, but also just to like make sure that they don't like disappear, because these days I feel like online something will gain a lot of traction and a lot of internet traffic, and then people will treat it as if it were a trend and then it disappears. So I want to be able to get my foot in the door in showing these different perspectives, but also maintain them and like keep them out there so they're not just treated like as if it were a phase. So just constantly keeping those voices out there and like making sure that they're not treated as if it's like, oh yeah, like a movement. It's an ongoing fight and it's an ongoing narration. Yeah.
It's life. It's
Exactly.
our life.
Exactly.
It's our life. Sorry, I'd had to interject. It's our life, and that's why it's not just a movement.
Yeah, it's not a fad. It's not.
No,
like,
not a fad. Absolutely.
not a trend. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not something that strays from the white norm. It's an actual life story, and our perspectives have been crafted by like the white norm. So not anymore.
Thanks for that, Gina. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. Just in terms, particularly of like in this country, I think the Windrush generation as well is really perceived as being primarily Afro-Caribbean or African Caribbean, and so therefore there's not as much about and the experiences of Indian Black, Indian Brits from the Caribbean, So it's great that you're adding to the work that's been done by I think Maria Del Pilar Khalidi has been doing a lot of work, as has David Dabadine, but it's very recent, and it's great. It would be great to hear a lot more, many new voices, and particularly of the second generation too.
To touch on that as well, Maria has started up a project for the providing voices, like an oral tradition for the indentured migrants of Fiji recently that I'm working on her with. So that's going to be quite exciting. We also found out recently that we're related. Maria.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Well, that's always the way with Guyanese, as far as I can see. I think Rod's related to everyone I've ever met. So,
Hello,
including
Coach.
to my sister, my brother's wife, which is super weird. But I wanted to let John David just raise a question. I think John David has a question that's unrelated, but before I forget, I just want John, if you could just present your question to everybody so they have time to get back to you on it.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
And congratulations to all the presenters, McWatt, Gina, Sandra, always the entertainer. Great stuff. And thanks to Juanito and Rod for putting this together. Just a quick question, and you don't have to indicate now. You can always get my details from Juanito or Rod. I'm helping someone to look for a relative. The person's name is Bernard de Souza. They're probably in their 80s. They've lived in Wandsworth between 63 and 64, then moved to Brighton. So if that name rings a bell, you've got any information, please get in touch with me, Bernard de Souza. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thanks.
Thanks, Anita.
No problem.
I just wanted to say, Aubrey, you didn't mention your new book. Is it on poetry that you're writing?
Yes, I actually, there are two things on that. I just published a book called Poems in Words and Images. It has a selection of 50 poems from the ones I've written, and I've included on the other side 50 of my drawings, charcoal drawings. But so that's on Amazon as well.
Thank you.
I just published it this week. And I selected those poems because I had written for a long time ago and published a coffee table book. And I think Juanita and Rod, you know about this. And what I decided to do is that book is 238 pages. It has about 100 poems, and it has 100 of my paintings, because I've got, so I've selected the paintings that I've done after art school, from which I painted purely by imagination. And as my way, because it's a very expensive book, as my way of opening up and allowing or encouraging access to the arts for people who may, not be able to for economic reasons or priorities or whatever, I have opened that up for public access, for which it could be shared to anyone. So I could send that link to Juanita.
It's free.
It's free. It's free. It's there's no cost to it. So the link puts you to the book, and you just click on it, and you could turn the pages, and there's 238 pages. There's 100 drawings, 100 poems, and I've opened that up for public. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up, because it's two avenues. But since I published that book in 2016, I had written a lot of poetry. So so I selected from my total works 50 that I think were fairly okay.
Thank you.
It's called, if I could just say, it's called Call to Peace, poems in words and images. Sorry.
No, not at all. I literally just wanted to say that I had a look at it and I absolutely loved it. I had no idea that you had such a wide range of painterly skills, and I think particularly you do this kind of, looks like with is it with ink or something, kind of like ink drawings? I don't know.
They're charcoal. They're
okay.
They're 24 18 by 24 charcoal drawings, and I have about 100 of them, and I have selected 50 to be put into that book, and the poem is on one side, the drawing is on the other, just for a different look at stuff. They're not related in any way, a drawing to a painting. Yeah, no, I've done drawings, and I painted all my life while I had a corporate career in order to maintain my sanity. And then once I retired, I went to art school, and I got a much better foundation, but I had a large portfolio when I retired. But I wanted to get a formal education in art. So 20 years ago or so, when I retired, I went to art school, and I've painted only from imagination from that time. That's why I see that.
You should say that the book is the free book is oil painting.
Yeah,
the free book. If I could just mention the book that I just offered, that's available to everyone free of charge to access online, is all of my oil paintings. So I've done pretty much oil. And this is what it looks like, but you could access it. And that's one of my paintings, and that which my son owns.
Yeah, no, I highly recommend it. I really thoroughly enjoyed looking through it. And I forgot, actually, because I saw it on your page, and then I forgot to put it on the Guyana Speaks Facebook page. So I'll do that. But if you could just, anything that you think will be of interest to everyone, just send it through to us and we'll share it. So
I'll send you the link, because I know you have it, but I'll just send it again.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
I had one quick question, if I could, and that is, I wonder, during the critical period where we documented the precise political history in the 2 decades prior to independence, we felt that was important to infuse, because even as a child growing up, I didn't know that. So there's mountains of research that's done on the history, and what Donna has done and we have done is select the critical social and political evolution points leading up to the diaspora. So I'm wondering, in the audience, how many of you actually may have lived in Guyana in those 20 years prior to? One hand.
Quite a few. Quite a few.
Oh, I've left it.
Liesl there might have a word to say.
Yeah, okay. I'll stop now. If anybody wants to comment on.
Who shall I go to? Put your hand up if you'd like to, Auntie Joyce. Anybody else want to have a chat? Shall I go straight? I'm going to go to Auntie Joyce first. Auntie Joyce, just unmute your screen, then yeah, just share your memories.
Can I speak now?
Yes, please do.
In 1953, my friend Sybil Patson and I, we never missed a public meeting on Border Green, and we all looked forward to voting. It was adult suffrage, one man, one vote, and for the first time, I voted in 1953. And not every meeting we went to Border Green with Boko Allen, rowing us with a chick congate while we meeting either for Cherry or Odo to come to talk of us. And when they're coming, you can hear the susurration when they're coming. Everybody's on court to hear when they come to speak to us. Brindley Ben used to speak at the corner of Light Street and Cumming Street. We followed them everywhere. And we all voted universal adult. It used to roll off our tongue. We used to love to say universal adult suffrage, you know, because it was a wonderful time. And I lived through that time from 1953 when you talked about the strikes in 1962. That I think came as everybody went on strike that day. And the word loot came into our vocabulary. Everybody was looting. And I remember at the training college, we were doing the teaching practice, and I went to see a student at Trinity School, and this little boy was doing his news, and it was a beautiful picture with the cartoons, and it all had to do with looting. If the police had come in there, they would have found out what really happened to his parents. And a lot of the things that were looted, they were left in the Lepentier burial ground. People going around with fridges and mattresses on their heads, and then they found they couldn't carry it, and they just left them in the cemetery.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I was actually at that meeting at Border Green when Forbes made his sort of like famous Mark Antony speech. I'm not telling you to do this, and they just went straight up and burnt the city down. So yeah, I was there, and I want to just talk to something very quickly that I believe it was Gina who mentioned, that this line of identity, like it was clear growing up. I was a red man because, you know, I'm Amerindian and black and white, but then when the trouble came and there was Indians and Africans, that line was sort of erased, and you sort of like you were either one or the other. And I was in my book, I speak about two occasions. I was accosted twice by Indians. There's a black man, let's get him. And then I was assaulted by the black. There's a coolie, let's go get him. So that line, I think that was a beautiful point. That was it, Gina? Was it you that made that point? Yes.
Because until then, it was Odo and Chedi, and nobody talked about race because we were all one. My best friends were Indians. My best friends, and they had a black man who used to look after my Indian friends. Had a black man Bouye who used to look after her children, and so we couldn't. My friend Ursula Goodisol, we sucked the same piece of sweetie in Kingston Methodist schoolyard. And I couldn't understand when it happened, Ursula and I, when the 62 happened, I remember we ran into one another on High Street. Fortunately, it was one way because we were hugging and crying. What has happened to us?
Auntie Joyce referred to Odo.
We were Guyanese. We weren't Indo-Guyanese or Afro-Guyanese or mixed race Guyanese. We were Guyanese.
By the way, Auntie Joyce referred to Odo. Odo is Forbes Burnham. Odo. Forbes Burnham. Just Odo.
Can I just quickly as well point out, I'm just going through the comments that are coming through, and Gina's just, because you mentioned the word loot, Gina's just pointed out that loot is a Hindi word that in itself was looted by the British. So I think that was quite funny. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that my understanding was that the word coolie was originally an Indian word that just meant laborer. So it can't, I'm guessing within the Caribbean context, it probably became a derogatory word because of the kind of British class system, whereby a laborer was somebody who would have been at the bottom of the pile. And that's why coolie was a negative word. I don't know. I mean, if anybody has any other ideas.
Well,
it is, Juanita, it is a derogatory word in Guyana, but coolies were people who came from the Danga region of India, and the British called them coolies.
Yeah,
and that's how it was derogatory. It's quite a
that's incorrect.
But is it not a Hindi word?
No,
it's not a Hindi word.
Juanita.
It's a group of people who came from a mountainous region, and they were from the forest, and a place called Danga.
Okay, okay.
And it became a very derogatory, name, because even now, when there's a conflict between Indians and Africans, the Africans would call the Indians
too.
They are coolies, and even the people from India, when some of them, not all of them, you go to India, and sometimes they are very discriminative. If you were an indentured labor, they look down on you.
Yeah, I'm wondering though, is that to do with the caste system as well? I was just wondering if that had anything to do with the way the caste system had demarked different roles to different peoples.
No, the caste system was something, originally it was a division of an economic division that, if you had talent for being an artist, you would be put into a category where artists were.
Okay.
And if you just were a laborer, then you were put into that caste. But if you were a laborer and you showed an ability to be something better, like a doctor or a lawyer, then you would move up to that caste. But over the years, that has been actually what you call use of the discrimination, especially when the British came. It was no longer a division of labor. It was just to put you there like, it's like divide and rule, Call them coolies and you're a low caste.
I'm going to read some more comments. So Gina, it seems like it's one of those words where there's what do you call it? A lot of people have inherited different stories down the line. So Gina's saying here, I heard it was from the Tamil word kulfi, meaning low wage. Zinzi or Adele perhaps is also saying coolie is definitely used in India as a word. And of course, the Chinese laborers were also called
coolies. There are lots of interpretations, I guess.
Yeah. I actually, the reason I thought it meant the word laborers, I'd heard that from Professor Clem Seasharan. So I'd kind of assumed that was a definitive, but perhaps it's still something that's under contestation. Janet Lawrence is saying that it was originally used to define indentured laborers from Asia, which of course is true. And railway workers in the US. I didn't know that. Chinese labor.
Yeah.
They were called coolies as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that prior to indentureship, my understanding was that the word coolie was already in common currency within India as a word that denoted people who were working people. People work with their hands. Somebody else here said that it was a word that was used to mean porters. It says Adele says in India it's used was used, for example, to denote someone who's a porter.
I can understand that. If it was a division of labor, then obviously not everyone can be artistic. So they put them in, in categories.
All right. Well, thank you for your input there, Enid. I think.
Can I come in?
Yes, please, Auntie Joyce, go ahead.
You see, as a little girl, it would be in the 1930, 35. You went to we had family who were farmers in the West Bank, and they would bring the produce, the plantain, the yam, and whatever, and the cassava, and then you had to pay to the market to bring these things to the pavement, and there were these Indians waiting there, and you call them a jobber man. And I don't think they were referred to as coolies, but you call him a jobber man, and he would have a pad. So you put the pad on his head, and then you put the basket on that pad, and you gave him 4 cents, and he would fetch that for you to where we lived in Ben Street. And you walk behind him, and they were mostly Indians. And people said they would put a wrapper around their leg to where they would hide the money that he paid them. And after a time, then they discovered they could have a little cart. So they would put these things in the cart, and they would carry that. I would be following him from Stabrook Market to Ben Street, and he will carry that stuff until we got, and we would pay him. And so there was that also, this kind of jobber man, coolie Indian. That was the first time I had any experience of somebody doing that kind of job.
Yes.
And that would be in the 1930s, 1934, 35, 36.
Yeah.
And so they would be sitting on the pavement waiting for a job. And so when you came out, you gave them this job, and he put a pad on his head to sort of, and put the basket on top of it to keep it. And he would carry, and he would go tripping along in front of me until we got to Ben Street. That was a long way to do it.
Yeah.
But they did.
Nicola, where did you live in Ben Street? I lived at S. Ben Street.
I lived in S. Ben Street too, working Workmansville.
I lived at S. Ben Street.
Put them together.
Well,
Put them together.
in whose yard, Rod?
We can put you all together.
We all got to put you all together, yeah.
We got to talk. We got to talk.
You all got to talk, exactly. I just want to point out somebody else. Adele has kindly posted onto the chat section what the etymology of the word coolie is. I think most people find it offensive. However, I know that, as Rashini's just pointing out here, that a lot of people are reclaiming the word. Actually, Gina mentioned it as well, that various authors have been reclaiming the word, various individuals, as a way to kind of subvert colonial power structures. So I don't know, I guess it's still in contestation. So just throwing it out there. But just because it's interesting to see what the etymology is, have a look in the chat. Moving on from that, does anybody else have any questions they want to pose to the speakers? Carl, Warren, did you have anything? Lizel, great to see you. Anybody?
I don't know whether I see that my friend from school, Bruce Nobriga, is among us.
He sneaked in late, but I won't mention that.
But I remembered that in '62, at the height of troubles, two things in particular. First was the British troops that were sent to quell the riots were billeted at QC, and they occupied one wing nearest to the sports field, and we were banned from, using the corridors there. But they were on the whole fairly hospitable towards the students. And we were sitting at GCSEs at that time. And I remembered sitting one of my subjects. And it was, I can't remember what subject it was, but there were also colleagues sitting physics with chemistry, and there was an explosion, and at that time we were doing Oxford and Cambridge, and they passed everyone because of the disruption. Also, one of the things I remembered was my father was one of the senior civil servants in the Treasury, and it was the first time, from what I recall, that the civil service went on strike in '62. And they used to meet at the Civil Service Association every day to, I suppose, both to give moral support as well as to planned tactics because the Civil Service Union. But I lived at the time at Camp on Norton Street. And I remembered seeing looters with stuff on their backs, wheeling their bicycles with, I don't know, I saw one person with a fridge and pushing their cycles. And, you know, the troops and the police could not be everywhere and couldn't really police that sort of localized looting at the time. So those are my
Thank you.
memories.
Thanks for that. Greer?
Greer?
Greer, I can see you made some comments on here.
Yes.
What did you say? You got this? Your family lived and owned, what's that, in Ben Street? Oh,
yeah, YY Ben Street, the hours.
YY
Ben Street.
Okay.
Who the hours? Lorraine Hour?
Yeah, my grandmother was Rebecca Hour, the sister of George, who is great-grandfather of Lorraine.
Oh.
The Hour family.
Yeah, I knew Lorraine.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add? I'm gonna, Sally Gibson. I'm trying to unmute you. Oh, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself there.
No.
Why is that? Oh, there you go. Hang on.
Now it's gone again.
Yeah.
Yay, there you are.
No, I think just I'm not. I left Guyana in '62, so my memories are. I mean, I'm much about everything that happened over here, but I think what we've heard today is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Completely agree with Sandra. We've all got to document our histories. I've recently lost my father, and everything's just lost.
Yeah.
You don't take this on board. You just don't. Comes through one ear, goes out the other. And I think we need to do it for our children. Yeah. I mean, I'm now in the States and Canada, and we don't have a lot of history, so we must put it down. Yeah.
I think especially the sort of early 20th century history in Guyana, I kind of feel like a lot more research needs to be done from the mid 20th century onwards. So I really love that you've got Aubrey, you've kind of covered that period from the 40s and 50s. It's really fascinating.
You want to hear a funny story about that and about writing the book?
Yeah.
So Donna hasn't been to Guyana, so she's asking me, what kind of flowers do you have? I said, well, we have the powder puff, the hibiscus, and roses, and what kind of trees? Well, we have croton. Well, she got fascinated with the croton tree with all the different colored leaves.
Wait, can I just defend myself for a minute here? Okay, so he's writing the memoir part. I'm doing the research for the political part. So, I didn't have a huge part in doing that kind of stuff, but there were moments in time, because we wrote this book together over 4 years, where he would write a chapter and I thought, well, it needs a little bit more local color. We have to describe the scene a little bit. So I'd go back and research these, flora and fauna, and maybe put something in, and then I'd highlight it in yellow and say, can you check this and see if this is accurate?
So I'm telling her, birds, we have kiskadees and blue sackies and toucans. So next thing I know, there's this chapter written, and Donna has, and then she asked me about the animals. We have saki winkies, but the birds are blue sakis. So she gets all mixed up. And this chapter in the book,
the whole chapter.
No, the section about going down the street, and there's this croton tree laden with saki winky monkeys and sakis and toucans. I said, Donna, the croton tree usually doesn't grow more than 4 feet high. How are we going to get all those monkeys and macaws and everything in there and all the little
Oh, Donna.
So
we still joke about the Saki Winkies and the Croton.
So now I talked to Vibert and just one thing. So the other day I was supposed to call him at 7. I called him, on Wednesday, I called him on Tuesday. I got mixed up. And so he retorted to me because he has read the book. He says, you had a Saki Winky moment.
We also wrote a chapter about his sister's wedding, and I interviewed her. She's still alive, and to try to get all the details right about the dresses and what colors and the flowers and stuff. Well, she couldn't remember the flowers. So I went back and I'm like researching. So I put these cannonballs. I didn't know what they were, and I highlighted it in yellow so he could fix it. But I put these cannonballs in her bouquet, and then Aubrey had to explain these are like stink bombs that if they fall they make a big noise and they smell real bad.
So Donna had the bridal bouquet because she thought that the flowers from the cannonball tree, she thought that they were called cannonballs. So she had actual cannonballs on the altar and cannonballs in my.
My bad.
Well, we got that sorted out. She did a great job.
I have someone here. Ken is asking, what is a Saki Winky?
A Saki Winky is a monkey.
Yeah. A little monkey.
A little monkey, yes.
Yeah, a very little cheeky monkey.
Right. You could explain.
So, and there's some comments here on the chat. Actually, I'm going to ask Sandra to pipe in. Sandra, if Sandra can, I think you put something here about the BCA and the British Library. So it looks like some sound advice on what we can all do. Yeah. So Sandra, please share your thoughts.
Okay, people have asked me about recording, and yeah, somebody said Karinya. Sorry,
Karinya, yeah.
Karinya, yeah. She said about get your phone out and start recording your, just start recording stories. Yeah, the BCA and the British Library, I know they take in archives. So if you feel you've got something, that you need, that you can deposit, then approach them. And I know the British Library has, like, they've got Windrush resources and so forth there. We used to have we used to have the Commonwealth Institute, which was just a wonderful place, and unfortunately it got, it's now the design centre. Not unfortunately, it's nice that the design centre's there, but the collection, the library that's just gone, which is a right shame. And I think our high commissions, I know they're probably not geared up to do this recording, but we need maybe to approach them and see what they can do.
If I could just add to that, actually, I recently just put in a bid to the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and whether or not I'll be lucky enough to get it, I don't know. But the plan is for the University of London to work with the Black Cultural Archives to start building up on the oral history archive they've already got there. So one of the other things I would really encourage people to do is just to either get your kids to interview you or interview each other, but talk about your experiences as young people, growing up, whether it's in Britain, whether it's in Guyana, wherever it is. All of the migrant stories in the UK are hugely important and currently really poorly underrepresented in higher education institutions, but also within the schools. So we're actively within the university trying to get people to share their stories, record them, talk about your experiences at work, talk about your experiences at school. The particular project I'd been working on was to do with the Windrush scandal, and to do with the sort of Windrush generation's relationship to the British state. And so, the kind of difficulties people have had with their so-called immigration status, which it isn't an immigration status, let's face it, because everybody who arrived here from the Windrush generation was British. So not quite sure how they managed to then suddenly decide they weren't British. But one of the things that actually came out of my research that might amuse you is to do with call names, because actually one of the things we found out was that because some Caribbean people use their call names. So one example of somebody I interviewed, say his name was, I don't know, Paul Michael, but he didn't know that was his name. His mother for the whole of his life called him Georgie or something. So when he came to school, everybody here thought his name was George, and the school recorded his name as George. He went on, like, he won school medals and his name was George. So when the British then contested, the Home Office contested his status here, he then wasn't able to prove that he was Paul whoever, because all of the records had him as Georgie at school. Georgie won this, Georgie won that. So it's just these kinds of challenges are really important, that we do record our stories so that there's a greater understanding about Caribbean culture as well, because that was one of the things we found. The Home Office had no clue that this was just standard practice, which, I mean, you would think they would know something about the history of the Caribbean, but they had no idea that call names were so commonplace that was one of the type of issues that might arise. But yeah, if I can encourage everybody, record everything. We've actually gone way past our 4 o'clock finish time. So I mean, quite happy to carry on going if you want to. If anybody else has anything else they want to contribute. I see Joe Dolphin there. Joe, did you have anything you wanted to contribute?
No,
Hi, Joe. I'm going to unmute you. Perfect. Oh, sorry, hang on. If you unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Great.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm in Barbados. Aubrey and I just reconnected after, what is it, maybe 50 years.
Oh, wow.
So that has been a big plus, and we hope to make that even firmer. But I just, in listening to Sandra, I realized what my grandfather used to say, that we are a nation of very oral people. We speak, and I know when I was in Suriname, the elders used to get together every Sunday morning, and they would have a discussion in a group, and the younger ones would be outside, and they will talk about history and culture and so on, and very little writing was done. But as I listen to Sandra, I think the importance of writing, it reminds me of that old African saying that when an old man dies, a library burns down. And it applies to an old woman too. And I really was very interested in hearing, the stories that Sandra shared. And I just wanted to say how appreciative I am for this moment. So that's it, really.
Thank you so much.
I wish I'd spoken to my grandfather and grandparents and my parents some more. Now I regret that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but you still together, the family that you've got, start piecing it together. I mean, yeah, because nothing's ever lost. Yeah. It's just there, different stories around, and whatever's there, start piecing that together. That's what I think you should do.
Yes, Sandra, my mom passed last year, and it took me a while to go through her stuff. I started and just couldn't do it. But in going through her stuff, I found that my dad used to keep very meticulous records about lots of stuff, and now it's
fantastic.
It's just there. And my wife, her father was a poet, and she just discovered a lot of the Guyanese poet Martin Carter, and she just discovered a lot of his stuff.
What a gem! Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, and this is what's important, because people feel that we've given nothing to the world, but we've given so much. The Caribbean was Britain's South. America had their deep South. The Caribbean, Guyana was the South. And so we need to start telling that story, so their eyes don't pass us. That they value us. And I mean, together, just in this chat, I mean, it's been maybe about 50 plus people, and we've all got stories, and let alone the whole of Guyana, let alone the Caribbean, and then Africa, and Black America, and and all what's happening today in this world shouldn't be happening. Because
Just had a little snippet of
other parts of other people's. Yeah, sorry, Rod.
No, I was just saying we just had a little snippet of Auntie Joyce. That young lady is let's say a little north of 90, but it's like going to 10 libraries when you visit her. And Juanita and I go there and we just absorb.
Yeah.
And I carry my my little Sony dictaphone as well.
Good.
So
we need to start getting those stories there, because libraries have played an important part. I mean, Alexander, he didn't have a library before he went to Timbuktu and decimated it, and we called it and renamed it Alexander's Library. It wasn't his library. So we are people who have written stuff as well as told. But yeah, you've got to change the narrative.
Since you mentioned that, Sandra, I see that Aubrey's mentioned here that Joe's father-in-law was actually Martin Carter. So, wow. I also wanted to mention
Sonia's husband.
Who's Sonia's husband?
I think.
Yes.
Your wife's first name?
Yes.
Sonia.
So you're correct, Rod. You're correct. And I knew your mom very well too when she was here in Barbados. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Look at that.
Can I just say, this is why you can't do things. As a child, I know I wasn't allowed to play out, but I could go to the library. So I'd wander all the libraries of London as a child, and it was great. Until then, you would meet people who would say, "But I'm in East London to South London." I meet people saying, "But are you Agard child? What are you doing here?" You know, because it's guys, and it's the link here. Everybody know each other. It's frightening. Really.
Yeah.
It's so scary. Sorry.
Thanks for that, Sandra. I just want to quickly, I'm conscious that people are putting comments on chat and I haven't been reading them all. Sharon has pointed out here that she's saying that call names are an African tradition, and she was told that people got call names because if a Jumbi or spirit called the person by the call name, they'd not be able to take them away because obviously they didn't have their real name. So yeah, and that's certainly something I've heard many times. So thanks so much for that, Sharon. Let me see if there's anything else. I think Aubrey, are you related to Clifford McWatt, the Guyanese cricketer? I don't know, Aubrey, if you heard that. Somebody, Carl Warren, is asking if you're related to Clifford McWatt.
Yes, Clifford is my father's brother. We were very, very close. He is the West Indian wicketkeeper, and we have two references in the book. Once he set the 9th wicket record at cricket for with J.K. Holt, the opening batsman, and then there was a huge riot when he was run out going for the century, and the people in the stands, they started to throw bottles inside. I mean, those who lived there at the time would have remembered that was in the 60s.
Okay.
And yes, and my father was a cricketer as well. He captained the University of London Cricket Club. He was the first non-white ever to captain a cricket team in England. Wow. When he was studying there in '53. So yeah, I come from a strong cricketing background, and none of those genes, I have to tell you, not even a little drop.
Not a drop.
Me.
You didn't get none.
I didn't get any of it.
Not even a tups, right?
Not even a tups.
But Aubrey, how many of them are writers and painters and artists? So that's how you've made up for it. Yeah. That's how
Well, yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Sandra. And by the way, I taught Donna something that you expression you just used, and so she tells me all the time. What is it? Don't take it.
Don't take your eyes and pass me.
Don't take your eyes and pass me.
Take your eyes and pass me.
How'd you do that?
Don't check your eyes and pass me.
That's the Guyanese. That's the Guyanese, because my parents would always say that when we were in trouble. When we'd be too naughty.
It's spoken. It's said in the novel. Of course, you can't have anything Guyanese written without "Don't take your eyes and pass me." Yeah. All right.
All right.
Yes.
So, as we wind down,
yeah, go for it.
I just wanted, for those in London, if Boris doesn't tell us that we have to stay home, I'm still doing my walks. So this is our Black Legacy walk with an emphasis on Guyana, going from Piccadilly Circus through to Parliament Square. So there are about 50 points of interest, many instances of Guyanese contributions, and I've been doing it every weekend. I'm on furlough, so it's given me a new lease on life. So if anybody would like to go, just check Guyana Speaks page and you can join us.
And we got a vote of thanks there from Corinne, who says everybody should go on his walk. So there you go. We've got some people in the audience who've been on them.
Thank you.
We will try and come together again in October. So we're going to do the last Sunday of the month in October again. Clearly, I think Rod and I had secretly hoped COVID was just going to be here for a few months and disappear, and we wouldn't have to get our heads around Zoom. But clearly, that's not happening. So yeah, we're going to try and do this every month going forward.
Until we can get back.
And then in December, of course, we normally have our border bazaar, but we won't be doing it this year. But maybe we'll do, if anybody has any great ideas of what we could do online that would be fun. I mean, maybe some kind of game, I don't know, something we could do online. Maybe share stories of Guyanese Christmases, I don't know. So, but anyhow, we'll be in touch with everyone, and really, really appreciate that you've all joined us today. We've recorded it, so and I don't know how that side of it all works, but so I'm gonna post it onto the Guyana Speaks Facebook page. I know some of you don't use Facebook.
You can email it.
So I can email it, or I don't know if we can put it on YouTube. Anyway, I'm not sure how it works yet, but I'll make sure you all get a copy. Yeah, so I can leave it open for a free-for-all chat if people want
the
to
word
carry
is
on
Gyaff.
Gyaff. I keep saying chat. Oh Lord. Gyaff.
I can say, Juanita and Rod, are you able to send us the links by email?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Today,
yeah.
or you know what? Yeah.
Yep.
Be helpful.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone who's already on our database,
And
our
the
email database
books
will
that
be
were
sent
mentioned by Aubrey as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll all be on all be circulated as well. Yeah, so thank you very much, everyone, and we're gonna say goodbye now. But I saw actually, let me just double check the chat for comments, because Sandra is saying if anyone is interested in her writing, they can contact her at saagard1611@gmail.com. So before we close that, if you want that email address, please write that down now. Gina had to leave us earlier.
You can save the chat. This is what
I
I've
can save the
discovered.
chat.
Yeah,
I didn't
if
know
you look
that.
at the chat, by file, there's 3 dots. If you click on the dots, it says save chat. Oh, sorry.
We're doing that.
I've muted my,
Perfect.
But the thing you've got to do, you've got to keep doing it throughout.
Oh,
or maybe do it right at the end, because then it saves the whole thing.
Oh,
I've discovered that only Wednesday.
Thank you.
You've got to keep safe, so you can save the chat, because there's always lots of good comments in the chat.
So are you shutting down, or are you leaving it open?
Well, we can shut down, or you can have a free-for-all chat. It's up to you guys. I won't shut it down if you all want to just chat, and because there's a lot of people online actually still. I think there's about 37 people still online.
Yeah, there's some people. There's some people that I knew, and I wanted to just say hi, but I don't know.
I'd just like to say thank you to Juanita and Rod. Thank you for bringing this together. Guyana Speaks is just reminds me of home, and Dad would have loved it. He would have been there every
Thank you.
I would have dragged Mum
There's
to.
Gilly.
Thank you. Sorry, Aubrey.
There's Gilly. Yep.
Thanks so much, Sandra. Well, Sandra, you always support us, and we're really, really grateful. Really grateful.
Thank you, Fab.
Auntie Joyce,
thanks.
you too. You've been
And
wonderful.
Auntie Joyce, yeah, Auntie Joyce, I think is really just a member of Guyana Speaks. I don't know why you she's one of the founding members, really.
My sister there, she's always been a good supporter.
Kelly. Bruce, you didn't fall asleep this time.
Bruce.
I like teasing Bruce.
Auntie Joyce.
Hi, darling. Plenty love.
I belong to an old schoolgirls group, and most of the people in the group remember you. So, yeah.
That's Janet Lawrence, I think.
Lawrence,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to arrange for her to come and speak to your group.
Yeah, Janet, have you left your
Janet
details
Lawrence,
so Auntie Joyce can get to you?
I will do.
Vice versa. Make sure they join up. And Aubrey's trying to get in as well. I just love this. You know, this is wonderful.
Cami, hi. I haven't seen you for a while either.
Hi, I've been away.
What, in Guyana?
No, I was in Spain. I just got back on Friday.
Okay.
Yes. And I forgot I signed up for this. Hi.
Hello.
Bruce. I signed up and I forgot because I had to go and get some food. I'm supposed to be isolating, but I put my mask on and I quickly went to get some food. And I got back in and I thought, oh my God. So I came in at the end. Well, towards
the end. Okay.
No, well, I was there for like a good hour, I think. I came in about 3 o'clock.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I hope Spain was a lot. I mean, it seems like Spain had a lot of problems with COVID, so I don't know.
No, but the thing is where I was,
yeah,
there wasn't any problem. I wasn't in Madrid. I was in Marbella.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't have a lot of tourists.
Yeah.
August, I went at the end of August. It was quite a few people, but wasn't that much. So it was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was enjoyable.
Lovely. And I see also we have Michael Asquith. Hello. I think you joined us was it the last Guyana Speaks you did?
Michael lived in Guyana and worked there for a while.
I want to tell you just one little memory. Since we've been on Guyana Speaks, we've been talking about our years in Guyana. 2 o'clock one morning, we woke up, we're having a cup of tea, and we thought about the trade winds, not one blade of grass when they were having problems between. So we thought we'd Google it and see if they'll sing to us. So we're sitting up in bed, 2 o'clock in the morning, just a few years ago, listening to Not One Blade of Grass.
Yes.
But what
years were you there?
82 to 84.
81, 23.
But I wanted to know, our children went to
You lived at my Rory's house.
That's right.
Yeah, we lived in Rory Westman's house.
Yeah.
But our children went to Stella Maris. And that's how come we know Carl, because our children were in the same class. And I used to, because there were 56 in our son's class, 56 children, I used to take half the class in the afternoon and teach them singing. But we had such happy memories.
Well, thank you for being part of our family here as well. We appreciate
And
it.
can I add a little something?
Yes.
Our history with Guyana goes back to 1898.
Your
Before
family?
your time, I think. Because I have a great uncle who was a lawyer, and he was part of the Arbitration Commission, and he advised the British government on the border with Venezuela.
Wow.
And came up with a solution, actually, which was in favor of Guyana and to try and keep the Venezuelans out. And I can send you a few pages from a book.
If you could, I would love to see
it.
it.
On this rather interesting story of the Arbitration Commission, and there's a picture of him and his
Wow.
role in that whole thing. So I'll send that to you guys.
You have our email address. Thank you,
Yes,
Michael.
absolutely.
It's
certainly would be very
fascinating.
happy
It's obviously an ongoing issue. So Venezuela. So
I heard indirectly the Americans are thinking actually of invading.
Well, we're going to make sure they don't do that, I think.
If I could just say something on that point about British involvement, is that in our research, Donna also looked into what was happening with the U.S. and Britain, and looked into all the declassified files of the CIA and MI5, started to see how it all fit together. So there was a lot of interaction among the major powers at the time before independence.
Oh
Well,
yes.
interesting. Well, and so Sharon, how are you doing? Because we haven't seen you in a while. We want to hear from
Doing
you.
good. I've just finished doing something for the Horniman Museum on masquerade in Guyana, which is coming out for Black History Month and being disseminated to the schools. So I'll let you have a link to that once I've got it myself.
Please do. So it's called Masquerade in Guyana?
Well, I've looked at masquerade that went from Barbados to Guyana, and I've looked at the African context as well. So it's sort of all very rounded. I've also looked at the influence of carnival on it and traced it back to ancient Egypt.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Gosh.
Well, yeah, if you send it to us, we can then share it on Twitter and on Facebook as well. That'd be brilliant.
Thank you.
Joe, I'm spotting you there. If you want to come in and just say.
Yes, it's interesting just listening to the last comment, because I was just doing a little research out of history, and apparently they were looking at the relationship. How come a lot of Barbadians have Guyanese relatives and Guyanese relatives have Barbadian relatives, when certainly if a white plantation or a mulatto got pregnant by a black person here, they sent them to Guyana, and so they would start their family there. Sonia Rudd was tracking her great-great-grandmother, who was Jewish and was on a plantation here in Barbados, fell in love with a slave, and they got on the ship and they went to Guyana, and that is how that part of the family started. So it's just very interested in hearing, that comment. I mean, the relationships are unbelievable from so many disparate angles.
Can I just say something? What I researched was that Guyana was the breadbasket of the Caribbean, and lots of people migrated there. But also Barbados had a number of hurricanes, and the Guyanese government invited people from Barbados to live there. My great-grandmother was from Barbados, and a community of Bajans grew up around Georgetown.
And recently, just being in Cuba in February, not in northern part of Cuba, there were a whole set of Barbadians and a few Guyanese. You would have a Cuban who cannot speak a word of English, but his name would be Nicholas Brathwaite. And that's because his grandparents or so would have gone and worked in the Panama Canal, and then rather than come back, they would have gone to Cuba to live, and apparently a few Guyanese did the same thing. So it is interesting, as I said, those geographical.
Thank you for that. I can see Carlene's also there online. Carlene, hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well, thank you. Very interesting, the poetry and the history of Guyana and indentured workers and everything. Very, very interesting. I must say, well, most of the early years I was a child or not born yet when they were talking about, because 1953 and onwards, I was still a toddler. So most of it I wouldn't know anything about, but I do remember so much as when I think it was 62, when the looting and the burning, because I lived at that time in a place called Farm near Parika, but you could see the sky alight from all that distance, how it was burning, Georgetown was burning, as a child, as I remembered, so it's very interesting listening to all the different stories about it, the looting and all those things. Very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it's good to see you, Carlene. I also wanted to bring in Patricia Beckford. Patricia, hi. You're still muted. If you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello everyone. I'm actually Jamaican, but my grandchildren are half Guyanese. All three of them from two sides.
Oh, wow, you're kidding. Well.
Yes, yes. One from more the Indian side, Decans.
Yeah, okay.
And I have a Nelson as well. But the father lives in America. So the surname is Nelson.
Nelson and
Yes.
Carl.
So I always look up all the information for my grandchildren, you know, to give them, you know, some of their history as well. So yes.
Are you on our Facebook page, the Guyana SPEAKS Facebook page, or?
I've oh gosh, it's no, I'm not on the Facebook page, but I'm in contact with one lady that I do aqua with, and she always sends me the information on Guyana.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. No, I just mention it because I was thinking of your children. There's an author, I think, called, I can't remember his first name. It might be Joseph. The surname is Cartwright, but he and his wife write Creole stories for children.
All
So
right.
I thought you might be interested in that. You can get them from obviously on Amazon, but also I've posted a couple of free ones on our Guyana Speaks Facebook page. So
okay, I shall look it up.
Have a peek, and you'll be able to pick up.
I will. Okay. And I know Sandra very well.
Ah, well, you're lucky. blessed to know Sandra, that's for sure.
Yes, yes.
It's such a small world. Good to see you, Patricia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that how you heard about it, through Sandra?
No, not through Sandra. Through it's an aqua friend.
Okay.
Yes, she always goes to the meeting. I've always wanted to go to. Is it in Tooting?
Yeah,
I've never been able to make it.
Okay.
No, so I'm glad that you're online now.
Yeah, we've finally been dragged into modern technology.
Yes. Our wings have been clipped, and this is what we have to do.
This is what we have to do.
You know, yes, all the partying and everything has had to stop. So
yeah, just party online.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyway, thank you for joining us. And I spotted as well Carl Curtis there and his wife. So I want to just say hello to them. Hi guys. Mr. and Mrs. Curtis, hello. I don't know if you want to contribute any comments. There's Carl. Can you unmute?
And thanks ever so much for all the speakers. Learn new information.
Yeah. Well, it's great. It's great to see you. You know,
there are regulars,
all our familiar faces. It's actually it's really great that we're able to catch up with so many people. Also, I can see Gordon Stewart. Gordon, you're not on video. There he is. Yeah. Hi, Gordon. Unmute. Oh, you're both there. Really nice to see you both, Mr. and Mrs.
Okay.
Do you have any memories or anything you wanted to share with everybody?
All right. My thing that I wanted to speak about is what Gina touched on with regarding the decolonizing of the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to secondary school. We had large diets of Shakespeare, Jane Austen, and who's the other one? Anyway, well, we had lots of this stuff, but when we had English literature, everyone was sort of like bored with a lot of the lessons because it didn't really relate.
Yeah.
Because we had other teachers that informally taught us from CLR, James, about the Haitian Revolution, the Maroons in Jamaica, and different things. So, but the standard exams were based on the Eurocentric curriculum. So that was something I wanted to ask earlier. Can we master English without knowing Shakespeare, Jane Eyre, and Charles Dickens, and reading all that stuff?
I think that's a really interesting question. I've been thinking about that a lot because, you know, because I'd studied Edgar Mittelhouse's writings and other early writers from that kind of early 20th century period. It's actually really beneficial to know those classic writers in order to understand where they were coming from. So for example, with Mittelhauser, his writing is actually really subversive. But if you don't know those texts, those kind of standard texts, you don't know that that's what he's doing. You kind of read it and you think, oh, this man, it seems like he's so Anglo-centric or Eurocentric, and, you know, as if he's not particularly Guyanese. You know, there's a kind of feeling that he's always looking towards the West for his identity. But actually his writing is phenomenally clever because he's always subverting Western literature through his own writing. So I have kind of mixed feelings about that. I think it's really important that we have Creole writers and that we develop new writing, but I don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we can just have a lot more diversity. That's what I would like anyway. I'd like to see a lot more diversity. And certainly in the case of, like, if you're in Guyana, the curriculum should be very heavily weighted towards Guyanese writers. I don't really get why it wouldn't be.
Yeah, that's what I meant, because in Guyana, a lot of, you know, the Charles Dickens and the Shakespeare and all that.
Back then.
Unless you see films,
yeah,
relevant, but, you know, trying to imagine those things in the Guyanese setting, I think we're really masters when it comes to language for the things that we've, you know, that we've achieved. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I could just mention quickly, talking about Creole, is that the work I'm immediately working on is I've got about 55 short stories, pure Creole stories about Guyana, and that's something I hope to publish soon, maybe in a month or two.
Well, we'll have to do a session that's all in Creole then.
Yeah, that would be great.
Creole writers, that would be really fun, good fun. I would certainly love that. Now, who haven't I asked? So Chandra, are you there? I can't see you on video. But if you're still there, unmute.
I'm in Eltham.
You're in Eltham?
Yeah, man, on mission.
On mission?
Okay. Yeah, love.
Chandra, you're always on a mission, girl.
You know what I'm saying, girl. Keep me out of trouble. I just can't thank you guys enough for what you're doing. It's so overwhelming to hear you all. It's nice to be with your people. And I wanted to say hi to that lady who said her grandchildren are Guyanese, to give her a warm welcome.
Oh, Patricia, yeah.
Yeah, Patricia, honorary Guyanese girl. Yeah, you know, going to Guyana last year was healing for me, after losing mummy.
Yeah.
And the people are still warm, regardless of the toxic politicians.
Yeah.
I didn't have any negative thing to say about Guyana. Mind you, having said that, you know, I was strolling out, you know, like I can walk anywhere. And these builders tell me, come back, chalk and rob here, chalk and rob. It was so funny. Yeah, I was totally oblivious what's going on.
Yeah.
But, you know, I am so grateful for you guys, what you do, bringing us together. It's just wonderful. You know, it's just like being over there, hearing the old stories. I can relate to what Sandra was saying, you know. It's good, you know.
It's good to see you, 'cause you're another one of our very strong supporters. You always,
yeah, man, 100% Guyanese.
I'm so glad you joined.
Yes, I missed, man, the sorrel.
The
sorrel
sorrel
there.
the food, man, the morbi, and all.
I want the egg balls.
The egg ball.
Exactly. I know it's all the food that I'm missing. I'm like, could have had my goat curry. I'm going to unmute, or maybe Adele. Adele, are you there? Adele Sewell, you're hiding under Zinzi. Join in and say hello if you're there. No, not there. Who else is there? Gilly. So this is Rod's sister Gillian. Gilly, are you there? Yay! If you can mute. Gillian. No, you're not. You're still on mute. There you go. Yeah.
Day off for me, no furlough.
No furlough. Yeah, you're one of the few lucky ones. Still work. Well, I don't know if it's lucky or not. I've actually really enjoyed furlough. So.
You have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you have. But, yeah, good to see you too, Gilling.
Any thoughts on today?
My thoughts. This day of rest.
On the presentation today? On today's
Oh,
presentation?
very good. Very good turnout. A lot of people turn out.
Yeah, it surprised us very much.
Yeah.
Almost 60 people. Yeah.
So that's good. And then Dingen, are you going to say hello? Basically anyone who wants to join in the chat, please just unmute. It's what time is it now? So
3 hours
because
going on.
yeah, 3 hours. Rod is, I can see Rod's getting hungry.
Well,
You getting
yeah,
hungry?
well, yes, we don't want to abuse the privilege. I'm not
No,
sure,
absolutely.
because we've got,
I wanted to say, I do remember my mother telling us bedtime stories, and I cannot remember any of them. I remember them sort of involving, poo under hats or something. But I don't know if anyone has got any.
They like the folk stories, the kind of Baku stories and things.
Yes, but I can't remember them, and I don't know if, as I say, does anyone have any experience of these? And it would be lovely to collect them if we do, or a tradition that we haven't captured.
There's Anansi stories, obviously.
Yes,
There's lots of
yes.
Anansi stories and
That's
ghost
it.
stories.
Yes, that was it.
Caribbean Guyanese, great at telling ghost stories.
Absolutely.
My mother used to tell us a story about the old man who lived in our house in the chimney breast.
Yeah, I don't remember
and we would hear the old man howling. In fact, it was the wind. My mum, she would, and if we did the bad things, then the old man would get us.
Well, hike.
Or the jumbies.
They used to bed on these stories, So, yeah. And
very not politically correct and scaring.
No, absolutely not. But, but in those days.
With the old hike, all you had to do is put rice. You had to put rice because the old hag would have to sit there and count every grain of rice, so she couldn't come.
Exactly.
So that, and that's another dimension, isn't it? Or the or the superstition that goes around. But we have a lot of that.
Yeah. There's a wonderful Guyanese proverb book. Is it Joyce who's done that? Who did that book? Yes, of course it is. Sorry. The Guyanese proverb book, that's fantastic. If nobody's aware, I haven't got it on me here, but it's a really good, maybe you can find the link, it's a really good book that Auntie Joyce put together of Guyanese proverbs. That might trigger your memory about the stories.
We can try and do one on folk stories, Creole proverbs. Yeah, we'll try and do something like that for next.
Because that was maybe trigger your memory.
Do any particular readings or has any favorite stories or something, then please share them with us, and we'll try and pull some kind of program together.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I mean, unless there's any, if we can just put our hands together to thank all of our speakers. To thank Aubrey, thank Sandra. Gina's left already. To thank John David so much for loaning his account. And thank you all so much for just supporting us every time. We really, really appreciate it. I'm going to save the chat so that any links I see in there that are useful, I can then circulate and let you all have the details. But I think other than that, it's probably time for us to close off and have dinner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Benita and Rod. Thank you so much for organising it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Brilliant.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Aubrey.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good.
See you, Bruce.
Many blessings.
Yeah, blessings.
Bye, Auntie Joyce. Brucey baby.
Save chat.
And Joe will be in touch.
Yeah.
Will do, Aubrey. Definitely.
Definitely. You two definitely must meet up. It's lovely. That's one thing about Zoom. It brings people together from across the world. It's wonderful.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, it's just wonderful.
Thank you, Guyanese Speak. You've done a splendid job.
Wonderful Guyana Speaks. Well done.
God.
Enjoy your dinner. You deserve
Yeah, man.
it.
What's for dinner?
Thank you all. Thank you all.
A hungry man.
Bye-bye.
Oh, curry and rice, and I got lettuce leaves.
Hungry man is an angry man.
You know what I'm saying?
You know that. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Love you lots.
Love you.
Bye. Take care.